Hi, everybody. Let's get ourselves started this evening. My name is Mark Bouman. I'm the Chicago Region Program Director in the Keller Science Action Center at the Field Museum. And I'm a board member of the Calumet Heritage Partnership, which is pleased to present this 22nd annual Calumet Heritage Conference. We are really excited because the last 2 days have been a lovely beginning, and this evening has a full slate of activities on the overall theme of placemaking, taking, keeping, and sharing. I'd like to thank our sponsors. As I said, the Calumet Heritage Partnership, a bi-state nonprofit that has been working on the heritage area for the last 23 years. The Calumet Collaborative, its partner in the effort to create a national heritage area. The Field Museum and Cliffs, the big steel company that last year at this time had a different name. And this evening, we also begin, as we did the other evenings, with an acknowledgement that as we gather, we acknowledge that the Calumet region occupies the traditional homelands of the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. And Illinois and Indiana are also home territories to Ho-Chunk, Miami, Anoka, Menominee, Sac, Fox, and their descendants. And the area was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for more than a dozen other Native tribes. Nearly 500,000 tribal members currently make their home in the 6 states of the upper Midwest. And we recognize that Native American peoples are the traditional stewards of the land that we now occupy, living here long before Chicago was a city, and are still thriving here today, as we heard in last night's wonderful presentation from Bonnie McDonald about Chicago's Monuments Project. And we heard from Christine Livingston on projects happening at the Dunes Visitor Center. And we heard from Stephen DeFalco about new thoughts about the correct interpretation of history at the Sand Ridge Nature Center. So in terms of the placemaking theme of this conference, we acknowledge that the region was known to be an important place long before European settlement. And we also want to highlight current efforts made by Native peoples to steward the place, from wild rice harvesting in the Miller Woods area of Gary to the efforts that I just described. And so we acknowledge that and are grateful. As we did last night, we opened with an introduction from Congresswoman Robin Kelly. And it was a very affecting introduction, and we're going to ask her to introduce us again tonight. And I think she strikes some of the themes that we're taking up directly tonight in a very nicely done introduction. So let's listen to Congresswoman Robin Kelly from the 2nd District of Illinois.
Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome my friends from Indiana and Illinois to the annual Calumet Heritage Conference. As the Congresswoman from Illinois' 2nd District, I represent about half of the so-called Calumet region, which, as you know, spreads across the Chicago Southland to Northwest Indiana, 2 areas that have shared very important histories. As you know, the word Calumet comes from the old Native American term, which means peace pipe. The peace pipe, of course, was used to bring people from different tribal nations together in harmony to celebrate and affirm their shared values and various commonalities in culture, geography, history, and humanity. And that's what this conference represents as well. I want to commend all of you for participating in this conference, and moreover, thank you and your many agencies for the often unappreciated commitment to preserving and promoting the uniqueness and diversity of the Calumet region. Diversity certainly is evident in the Calumet region. For starters, the region is now bookended by two national park sites. One, the Indiana Dunes, which highlights Lake Michigan and its beautiful shoreline, one of our unique natural assets. And two, the Bouman National Monument, which pays tribute to working class heroes and sheroes and our historic economic innovation. But there's more, much more, to our diversity than simply sand dunes and factory gates. The Calumet region is also home to many Native American tribes, home to one of America's aviation pioneers, Octave Chanute, whose research with gliders at the dunes paved the way for the Wright brothers' first flight. Home to the world's first black labor union, birthplace of America's Labor Day holiday, home to some of the nation's most diverse bird sanctuaries, home to a significant underground railroad station, and home to numerous landmarks associated with former President Obama and First Lady Michelle. Talk about unique diversity. So there's much to share and honor. I applaud the work of all of you, including efforts by the Calumet Collaborative, the Calumet Heritage Partnership, the Field Museum, local communities, historical societies, and nonprofit agencies, and of course, the National Park Service for the countless hours you put in to complete the already approved feasibility study and draft management plan for the proposed new Calumet Heritage Area. I look forward to working with all of you and my colleagues in Congress, and especially the newly elected member from Indiana's 1st District, my neighboring Congressman, Frank Mervan, as we look to introduce legislation designed to formally recognize the Calumet region as a national heritage area. Together, I hope we can all play a bigger role to preserve our story, promote local tourism and jobs, and honor the rich and shared history of this bi-state gem known as the Calumet region. Thanks for the opportunity to welcome you all today. Please keep up the good work and have a great conference.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And this Calumet Heritage Area, she spoke to the effort to create a national heritage area, and this is going to lead into our keynote speech in about 10 minutes from Dr. Rolando Herts about national heritage areas and their potential, not only for the economic impact that Robin Kelly described, but for their role in helping to coordinate and elevate the stories of community empowerment and diversity, human diversity in the landscape. I want to take a moment to highlight a couple of things that you see on this, that this is a functioning heritage area. We've been working on the effort for more than 20 years, but I would say that especially in the last 3 years since the completion of the feasibility study for a national heritage area, the effort has really begun to take off. And this year we also completed a management plan for a heritage area that does not in and of itself depend on national designation. That will bring resources and recognition and would be wonderful, but this is a functioning heritage area. The Calumet Voices National Stories Exhibition Series, currently at the Gary Public Library and Cultural Center, is a wonderful illustration of how 5 local historic sites and cultural institutions have come together to combine their stories in local people coming together regionally to tell a nationally significant story. And that exhibit, a new set of partners, next spring will open a new exhibit at the Porter County Museum. And then on November 11th, 2022, those 2 sets of partners and an additional set of partners will come together and with the Field Museum's collection and open the exhibit at the Field Museum, where it will run for a year. So the Calumet region will have that platform at that time. Do visit the website of the Calumet Heritage Area where you would, among other things, find an up-to-date region-wide events calendar. I would also highlight some very interesting new places that have opened in the region in the past year that are cognizant of this effort. One of them was Sandridge Nature Center that we heard from last night. Stephen DeFalco spoke to the reconfiguration of the Sandridge campus, but also of the Nature Center itself, and a new exhibit there that highlights, among other things, the critical role of Potawatomi past and present in the region. And it also points to the fact that this is a place in a regional context. On November 1st, the Ford Calumet Environmental Center, run by the Chicago Park District at Big Marsh, will have its formal opening. A wonderful exhibit in that space, in addition to the 300 acres of marsh restoration and a wildly popular and successful bike park. Those two things coexist. But in this exhibit, if you go in on the wall, very prominent is a map of the Calumet region, of the Calumet Heritage Area. And this is a gateway location to that area. We saw last night Christine Livingston speaking to the Dunes Visitor Center, reconfiguring how it thinks about people will come into this region. And of course, the big event in Labor Day just last month was the opening of the Pullman National Monument Visitors Center, which is another fantastic gateway, a fantastic achievement, and a wonderful link to all kinds of stories that are told across the region, as well as right here at that particular place. So I would remind you that on the website for this conference, there is a two-pager called the National Designation Initiative that highlights a couple of these things. Now, I want to turn the mic over for a few minutes to a guy I'd like to call my colleague, and I will. He's my colleague, Casey Terry. So Casey Terry, native of Munster, Indiana, got his degree at Valparaiso University, interned at the Porter County Museum, then just completed a master's in public history at Loyola University. And we actually met each other when I was talking about national heritage areas in this class on public history. And for the last few months, Casey has been working at the Field Museum, and we have learned a lot from him in the course of this and benefited from his work. He's done a lot of the behind the scenes work on this conference. But we also, Casey, a young person with fresh ideas, is taking this all in. And Casey, tell us more about that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Mark, for that lovely introduction. And I just want to thank everyone so much for coming out tonight to this conference. It means a lot to me, and I think it will mean a lot to the region as well. Like Mark said, my name is Casey Terry. I've lived in Munster, Indiana for about the past 20 years. But before that, my family has had connections to this region since the late 1800s. And when I say that, it's kind of hard to think about that, because when you grow up here, you don't think about the history of this place and the impact that it's had on the country. And yesterday's panels and the connections to local history really got me thinking about that, especially when Dr. Kathy Tobin from Purdue University Northwest noted, when do we start getting young people interested in local history? And for me, it wasn't until later in life when I started my master's program at Loyola, and I was talking to my grandparents about something that had happened to them in the 60s during the Cold War. And thinking about that, I think that I would have had a lot more reverence for this region a lot earlier on had I known more about this history. And I think that this is something that the heritage area has really opened my eyes to and can really help open a lot of eyes to the young people who live here. Because I think growing up here, you really get a sense of people trying to leave. It's very much a place where you are growing up and you don't know what's here. And I don't know if that's just due to lack of, not lack of effort, because the effort is there, but lack of efficacy of getting the word out. I didn't know about the heritage area until I met Mark this past spring. And after hearing about this initiative, I was like, how can I get involved? Because once I did, I learned about all of the nature, all of the history, all of the culture here, and why it is nationally significant and important. And I think that a key to this region really taking shape even further is going to be tapping into the talent and the efforts of the young people who live here. And that's why this heritage area is so important. And something also that I'd like to touch on is an idea that Stephen DeFalco brought up yesterday in his presentation, this idea of third place. So you have your home, your work, and then you need a place for leisure. And I think that the heritage area, in my view, is really working to create a regional third place, a place where people can go learn about the place they live, but also just have fun in the place they live, instead of trying to find somewhere else to have fun. Yes, so this is what this experience has really brought to me, is a deeper appreciation and understanding of the place that I live. And I hope that this conference has really shown that light for you. And I hope you can spread that message to the people in your lives as well. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Casey, and my good colleague. Thank you. And you point out that this is always unfolding. It's always a place that's in the making. I'm struck by two things to say. First of all, 10 years ago, right behind me here in the scene, our conference was on the water, and it was on the Calumet River. And in today's a meeting I was at today, attention was drawn to this particular place right here, for its now part of the National African American Water Trail. And our board member, Tom Shepard, has been part of an Underground Railroad effort, a site that is now registered on the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom's registry. Those events have been unfolding. This effort, 10 years ago at the conference, some of the conversations began that led in the direction of protection, identification, celebration, enjoyment of this particular piece of waterway right back here. I would also note that in today's meeting, we saw a wonderful comment from Paula Robinson from the Black Metropolis National Heritage Area effort, which is also not yet a National Heritage Area, but which has done fantastic things to draw attention to the national significance, of course, of the Bronzeville region. And we're going to come back to that in just a second. I would also point out, this has been a fantastic learning experience for all of us, and including me. And the place, as I say, is always sort of in the making, and that we're always thinking about it. And I want to point to a note here in the chat from Dr. John Lowe, who I'm so glad can join us this evening, a member of the Pokagon Potawatomi, and pointing out some corrections to our own land acknowledgement. We need to be learning and growing as we go. And I just really appreciate that correction. Thanks so much. And thanks for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to the conversations that will be unfolding in the coming year with tribal representatives and connecting that more fully into this whole effort. So I'm going to share my screen for one more quick second and say this here, that tonight we, in just a few moments, are going to turn to our keynote speaker, Dr. Herts from Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area. At 6:30, we've got a wonderful session on organizing community green spaces to that theme of it takes all of us working together at all scales to pull together in these spaces, and that nature is for everybody, and nature isn't out there, it's right here. And a lot of times it takes the local stewardship and advocacy to make it happen. And I'm really looking forward to that panel. And then at 7:30, we'll show how these assets that Casey just spoke to that are actually all around us, the resources that the community has in nature and in itself, and how to put them on the map, literally. And we'll be talking about nature, pollinators, but it's a great visualization of other resources that the region has, and so that we can count them, visibilize them, make them seen, that a heritage area grows from the ground up, from the individuals, communities, regional partners, national partners who make it happen. So I will say that I'm looking forward to this. Thank you if you've been here now for 3 nights with us. And we are going to now, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. So I have met Dr. Herts several times in National Heritage Area meetings, and have learned a lot from him already about this. He literally is currently at an Alliance of National Heritage Areas meeting. And the more I came to hear of his work, the more I knew we needed him here tonight. All the things we've talked about over the last few days about placemaking, when are you making it? When are you running the risk of taking it away from someone? How do we keep it and share it and celebrate it together in a way that is not extractive? This is a powerful message that he is perfectly positioned to speak to us too. Dr. Herts is the executive director of the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area and director of the Delta Center for Culture and Learning at Delta State University, where he served for the past 7 years. He also is on the board of the Alliance of National Heritage Areas, and he's the lead author on that organization's policy statement and position paper on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I have read and I would commend to all of you to read. And it makes a powerful case that, in addition to the economic impact, which is important, that what heritage areas can contribute in regional conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion is perhaps this is the organizational form that's just about right to have it, to have that conversation in a space. And he can certainly speak to that. And in addition, he's a native of the Chicago region. His master's degree is from the University of Chicago, and he did some work in the aforementioned Bronzeville area as part of his master's thesis. And his doctorate from Rutgers University connects these themes of placemaking to the roles that universities can play in their institutional role. So without any further ado, Dr. Herts, I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to let you share the screen. And thank you so much for coming tonight. And off you go.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay? I hope you can.
Sounds
Mark,
good.
Great. Mark, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And again, I am Dr. Rolando Herts, the director of the Delta Center for Culture and Learning at Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi, which we like to say is the heart of the Mississippi Delta region. I'm going to get this up on the screen just right now, my presentation. And I'm also, in that capacity, I serve as executive director of the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area. And it's been a pleasure serving in this capacity for the past 7 years. Our mission is to promote greater understanding of Mississippi Delta culture and history and its significance to the world. We say we do that through education, partnerships, and community engagement. And certainly our heritage area has been about that, and the partnership that we have with the National Park Service is so very critical to doing that work. And so I really appreciate that partnership among many others that we have at the Delta Center to do this work. But I wanted to start off as Mark mentioned, I am currently in West Virginia, Beckley, West Virginia, in fact, at our Alliance of National Heritage Areas meeting. And it's quite fitting that I will be giving this keynote about what I've decided the roles of national heritage areas in placemaking. One of the most important roles we play is with community events and festivals, meetings and such. I mean, we here with the Alliance meeting, we've been touring all around the region, going to different sites and having discussions about some of the placemaking work that's happening here through arts and culture and museums and local activism. And so this is quite, I guess, fortuitous and fitting that I'm here speaking about this. And I decided to add to the title that piece about community events and festivals and their role in shaping destination image, which I think is very, very important. And as you see here, images. Image is a very apt term for my presentation because you're going to see a whole lot of them. I'm a visual person. I like to show people what I'm discussing, or at least like give them a window. And particularly in this virtual environment and with the pandemic and everything, we're having to become, I think, more visual and connected that way. So hopefully you will get a feast for your eyes through the presentation that I'm about to give. But you've given me a feast for the eyes, Calumet. I mean, with this place in the Calumet resource guide that you've developed, I took a look at that, the great photos there, but then the fact that you all are providing some academic literature around placemaking and resources. I think that's excellent that you're doing that and providing that context and framing to the work. I'll be including some of that in my presentation as well. So speaking of destination image, we'll talk more about kind of what that is. With regard to the Mississippi Delta, it takes on the form of at least these 4 kind of metaphorical phrases about who we are and what some other people think we are. The National Park Service, I think back in the 90s, coined the Mississippi Delta as the cradle of American culture. We are known as the birthplace of the blues, the birthplace of America's music, the birthplace also of the modern civil rights movement, via the horrible lynching of Emmett Till, which is very much a part of the conversation now with the George Floyd murder and Black Lives Matter movement and other instances of police brutality across our country that has brought forth the whole conversation to the forefront about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so these metaphors, I actually had an opportunity to present for a metaphors conference out of Russia, University of Perm, which partners with Delta State University. And they were very struck by these metaphors that are used to discuss and talk about and create an image of the Mississippi Delta as this kind of birthplace, as the spring well of all things that are American. And certainly we are, I guess you could say, a laboratory, if you will, or even a living museum. I liked how Corey talked about third places and how regions can become those third places. You can step outside your door and engage in ways in national heritage areas that perhaps you might not be able to at other areas. I'll talk about that in a minute in terms of the importance of events and festivals and shaping, creating those environments. But those metaphors really, they speak to the beauty of life in America and some of the ugly aspects of life in America. And we'll talk more in depth about that in a moment. But what I certainly want to drive home is the importance of, again, cultural events and festivals, community events and festivals in, creating a destination image. And it's one of the most effective and important ways that heritage areas can contribute to creating a regional destination image. It's one thing to have, separate towns or what have you, each kind of operating on their own. But as a heritage area, our task is to think and act regionally. And oftentimes, what can create the linkages, the connections, the collaboration, and just bring everything to full picture is actually having a cohesive destination image. And I see signs of you all doing that. And so I wanted to give you hats off, Calumet Heritage Area, for the work that you've done on your management plan and the aspects that I've seen regarding events and festivals and how you have managed to inculcate some of the principles of placemaking that are put forth by the Project for Public Spaces. These certainly are not all of the principles, but these are some of them that I feel truly resonate with what you all have put in your management plan. The events and festivals I think that you all speak to, or at least your plans with it, certainly community-driven, visionary, inclusive, focused on creating destinations as we're talking about it. It's dynamic, transdisciplinary, bringing in different, viewpoints and all of that. They can be transformative and collaborative. So I'm going to talk a bit about how we've managed to do that in our heritage area with the work that we're doing. But I do want to give a nod to, what you all have in your management plan regarding creating a calendar of events, and that you acknowledge that it is a simple but powerful way that you can begin to coordinate activities across the region. So already you all are thinking and acting regionally. Bravo. That is one of the first, I would say, a major challenge sometimes that we encounter as heritage areas. Again, getting people to come on board with us thinking and acting regionally. And that the calendar can be used for greater coordination with regional efforts in the future. So you're thinking down the road. You're thinking about the types of festivals that are appealing to people nowadays, craft shows, art fairs, and festivals of that sort, music, cultural arts, even scrapbooking, that you may be offering these kind of diverse ways to engage various audiences, and not just visitors, but also your residents, because festivals and events serve educational and heritage sharing among residents. It provides opportunities for that to happen. And so there's this beautiful thing that happens with regard to the multi-layered kind of impacts and results that come out of festivals and events, or that can come out of them if they're well planned. And then even this conference, you all mentioned this conference and how you want to institutionalize it and make it a focal point in the annual round of events, and reaching a larger audience, and actually using it as a vehicle to share the message of what the Calumet Heritage Area's identity and image is. I think that's very smart. You will see where I'll mention that we've done that with some of the work that we've done with like our International Conference on the Blues at Delta State University and other types of events that really, again, it sends the message about who we are as a region, what we feel is important, and that can have its pros and cons, because festivals and events, honestly, there's something like monuments, right? And the whole conversation that's happening about Confederate monuments with regard to what they memorialize and the messages that they send about what a community or group of people value. And so it's very important then to think very carefully about what kind of message is being sent. by the events that you and festivals that you support as an organization, or that you create and have done. But this has been going on for over 20 years. So hats off to you for that. And clearly it's appealing, and you're having those important conversations. I mean, there was an Indigenous land acknowledgement to start this off. And I've heard over and over again, diversity, equity, inclusion. You all are definitely on the right track. And that you acknowledge that events and festivals can build awareness, strengthen partnerships, deepen community engagement, and activate heritage. So that takes me into kind of putting my academic hat on somewhat, a debate in the literature that's gone on for some time regarding what kinds of events actually do have the influence or impact on destination image. And so my dissertation advisor at Rutgers was kind of in the camp that talked about hallmark and mega events like the World Cup, the Olympics, the World's Fair, as having primacy over, those are the ones that really have the impact on destination image, because all we're really concerned about is what tourists, and visitors come away with in our regions and places and destinations. But I think that we've seen the tide turn on that, honestly. And I think that national heritage areas have and are playing a major role with that piece. There are other scholars who state that, even the smallest events like weddings, family reunions, which certainly do draw visitors from other places, or can, but even those can lend or add to or enhance destination image. So collectively, smaller community level events and festivals are very, very important. And oftentimes with those larger hallmark mega events, you don't get the true authentic flavor of a place. It's often a top-down structure, an organization that's coming in and hosting something and selecting perhaps which aspects of the regional culture are going to be highlighted. Whereas with what heritage areas do, it is really being in the community on the ground and having an eye for communities that perhaps have been left out, whose stories have not been told and not been shared. And there are opportunities then to support those kinds of festivals and events, create those opportunities, create safe spaces for that to happen. And then it becomes collectively over time a part of the destination image for the heritage area. So I think with that, it's important to ask, some critical questions regarding this. And so I put these out here as questions that heritage areas should really think about, in particular Calumet. I mean, existing heritage areas, but certainly emerging heritage areas like Calumet. So, how would you describe your heritage area's regional destination image, message, and identity? Is your heritage area's regional destination image already established? Or is there an opportunity to define or using DEI approaches, perhaps, particularly through events and festivals? If your regional destination image is well established, what are the opportunities and challenges that it presents from a DEI perspective? And so I'm going to talk about some of that we have experienced in the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area, because as I may have mentioned, a lot of people think of the blues when they come to the Mississippi Delta, and that's what they come for, but they come and they discover so much more that is there. And that's, we think, is a beautiful thing, particularly from a diversity, equity, inclusion perspective. And so going to the Alliance of National Heritage Areas, Mark mentioned that I am the author of the DEI policy statement for the Alliance, which we adopted in May of 2020. You will see this is on the screen here. I just included it because basically it's on the Alliance's website, but it's also included on page 8 of our DEI position paper, which is entitled Racial Equity, Community Empowerment, and Social Cohesion, Sociocultural Impacts of National Heritage Areas. And this work has been a labor of love to really do with the colleagues that I work with. I served as lead author, but we have a diversity, equity, inclusion committee that weighed in on this and certainly added very important feedback and aspects that perhaps I missed in my first draft. But that is the way that we work as heritage areas, collaboratively, and all of that as colleagues. So I think there's an important piece of this document, in addition to the DEI statement. If you go, and I actually have put in the chat a link to the paper. We actually here at the Alliance meeting ratified it, adopted it officially yesterday. And so now we can go and, release it to the public. So if you look at page 9, which I think is the opposite page of this DEI policy statement, there's a section on DEI cultural heritage development. And I think that it's very important. I'm going to read just a portion of this. I think it's important in terms of understanding kind of the direction that national heritage areas are going in. And clearly, what I've seen so far from Calumet, this is the direction you all are going in as well. And so you're right on point. But to do DEI cultural heritage development, NHA leaders and partners are called upon to think and act regionally and collectively. This means that NHAs do not own the cultural heritage stories and assets that belong to the diverse communities within their boundaries. Rather, NHAs engage these communities in finding, saving, telling, experiencing, and sharing their own cultural heritage stories and assets. I think that section, if you get a chance to look at it, really gets at the meat of what I'm talking about when we kind of intersect events and festivals with destination and image development that is sensitized to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm going to go through real quickly and talk about these, what racial equity is and what community empowerment is and what social cohesion is. But ultimately, national heritage areas, I'm giving you examples that are of heritage areas that are advancing a diverse, equitable, inclusive destination image through their work. What you'll notice looking through this document is that several of the heritage areas are doing this work through festivals and events. There's some event that took place, there's some meeting that took place, there's some commemoration or what have you, or series of events. And so that's what we're talking about here. So in terms of racial equity, it's defined as advancing policies and practices that help communities historically underserved, marginalized, and adversely affected by persistent poverty, systemic racism, and inequality gain access to opportunity, networks, and resources. And so one of the key examples that come out of the document with this is Oil Region National Heritage Area in Pennsylvania, which acknowledges the story of the Native American experience in the United States as a difficult and painful one. The NHA has worked with the Seneca Nation to heal historic wounds. Part of that healing process took place when Oil City's mayor proclaimed October 14, 2017 as Chief Corn Planter Day throughout the community, unveiling permanent commemorations about Chief Corn Planter, an 18th and 19th century diplomat from the Seneca Nation. Representatives of today's Seneca Nation were guest speakers and musicians and dancers at free public events, introducing a new 2-story outdoor mural, as well as a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania historical marker. So again, here we have an event, a festival, commemoration going on about Native American heritage in that region. The next one, community empowerment, focuses on, I'm going to go to a deeper dive with our Delta Jewels Oral History Partnership in the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area, which focused on the lives of African-American church mothers from the Mississippi Delta based on a book, Delta Jewels in Search of My Grandmother's Wisdom. And so I will talk about that a little bit more in depth. But community empowerment we define as providing resources to historically underserved, marginalized, and impoverished communities to find, save, tell, and experience their own stories. And then we have social cohesion. Social cohesion we define as developing a sense of belonging, trust, and upward social mobility among community members. And so the Yuma Crossing National Heritage Area in Arizona led the restoration and reopening of the historic Ocean to Ocean Highway Bridge. It was built in 1915, and the bridge connected tribal land to downtown Yuma, Arizona, but was closed in 1989 for structural deficiencies. And so the closed bridge became symbolic of the historic divide between the Yuma community and the Quechan Indian tribe. And so the Heritage Area played a major role in raising funds to get the bridge reopened, and ultimately over $1 million in funds. And so what ultimately happened is that once the bridge reopened, tribal and city residents met on the bridge to celebrate the reopening of the bridge, which both literally and figuratively reconnected the communities. And so that's what this image displays here, is that day when they all met on the bridge. And so this is powerful work that National Heritage Areas are doing to create, again, diverse, equitable, and inclusive destination images for their regions. And so as we could go a little further into the Mississippi Delta and who we are, on the left, you see an ad that we use with our partners at the Mississippi Heritage Trust, which is an historic preservation organization out of Jackson, Mississippi, but they service the entire state. And we've done a lot of work with them. And so they allow us to have a free ad in their journal, which is fabulous. And so this is our ongoing ad because we want to get the message out there. It says there, expect the unexpected from the most southern place on earth. We feel the blues is important. Absolutely. That was one of the first things that started tourism to the Mississippi Delta. And it still brings international visitors, at least pre-COVID, and starting back now as we're figuring out ways to do blues festivals and everything. But what we find is that when people come to the Delta for blues tourism, they discover so much more. So there is civil rights heritage there. There's the food. There's other forms of music. There's Chinese heritage, Lebanese heritage, Italian heritage. There's the river itself, there's agriculture, there's so many other themes. And I think, again, that's a beautiful thing about National Heritage Areas, is that they really force you to look at what are our overarching themes for this heritage area. And that diversifies your destination image portfolio, really. And so you've got several rabbits you can pull out the hat in terms of the various assets that you have on a regional scale. And so it allows other communities that may not have as much blues heritage or even civil rights heritage. And we do view civil rights as kind of the next tourism wave. And that's something I'm going to talk about in a moment. But other communities that may not have as many of those assets, it provides ways for them to engage. But I do want to put a more critical eye on this work and on this piece as we talk about, festivals and events and describing the region. So our Delta Center website offers a fairly well-balanced place narrative about the Mississippi Delta. It points to cultural appropriation and economic disempowerment that have characterized race relations in the Mississippi Delta and our entire country, quite frankly, for centuries. It's a carefully crafted place narrative that hints at issues of heritage dissonance, which is rooted in how cultural heritage stories are told, who is included and excluded from the story crafting process, and who is empowered and disempowered by the storytelling. So these are important things, again, for us to think about as we do this work. We see the Mississippi Delta as a mindset. It is a mystique of mythological proportions. Historian James Cobb has called the Mississippi Delta the most southern place on earth. Journalist Retta Grimsley Johnson has said that the Mississippi Delta is the South of fiction and fantasy. But this fantasy has grown out of the reality of American history. The Delta is a land that was virgin wilderness and swamp at the turn of the 20th century, cleared for cotton and plantation life through the 1930s, dominated by politically powerful white gentlemen planters, peopled by Black sharecroppers, Italian immigrants, Chinese, Lebanese, and Jewish merchants. It is the source of the Great Migration north to communities like Chicago and Detroit, the Calumet region. And so many African-American populations live there because they came out of the Mississippi Delta. It is the home of the blues, gospel, soul food, the birthplace of the modern civil rights movement via the murder of Emmett Till. It is a land where Black bluesmen Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson wrote the lyrics that eventually made the Rolling Stones, John Mayall, and Eric Clapton wealthy. The Mississippi Delta is a place of paradox and contrast, a place described as being of mean poverty and garish opulence, a place that has produced great authors, yet continues to suffer from illiteracy, a place that has produced great wealth for a few, but persistent poverty for many, a place of privilege for some and disadvantage for many, many others. And so keeping all of that in mind has been so very key to the work that we do with regard to community events and festivals that either we organize or that we support. And so here's some questions, again, that we ask ourselves when we do this work. Which stories are we telling or not telling through these festivals and events? How do we create more welcoming and accessible spaces? Who is not engaged in interpreting community stories through this work? How are we engaging communities that produce local cultural heritage resources in interpreting their own stories? And then how are the communities that produce the cultural heritage resources benefiting socioeconomically, intellectually, and emotionally? And that gets to the pride of place piece. Of course, that gets to how you can engage people in running, if they're entrepreneurs or what have you, and paying them for what they do. The musicians of our area who are blues players, speakers, people who lived the civil rights movement, and how do we support them in telling their story and continuing to do so? So that goes into a lot of the work that we do. And I'm going to give you an example now with our Delta Jewels Oral History Partnership. But to give a little framing, civil rights heritage, as I mentioned, is considered to be our next tourism movement. There's a lot that's going on here. Here is a bronze of Fannie Lou Hamer, who is, iconic voting rights activist who did not get her due, certainly while she was living, but certainly is doing so now. But there are other figures, Emmett and Mamie Till, Amzie Moore of Cleveland, who in his home hosted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others. Vera Mae Piggy, who was a voting rights activist in Clarksville, Mississippi, who worked with Aaron Henry, and she did voting registration out of her beauty shop. So talking about the importance of third places. Dr. TRM Howard, who was a millionaire in the historic Black town of Mount Bayou, who actually was the man who gave safe haven to Mamie Till when she came to the Delta for the murders of her son for that trial. She went to the historic Black town of Mount Bayou. That was where she stayed, and Dr. TRM Howard gave her safe haven. And then we have courageous people like the 1969 Black student sit-in participants at Delta State University, which I'll speak about also in a moment, as other events that have come out of the work that we've done, starting with the Delta Jewels Oral History Partnership. So civil rights heritage development is definitely happening in our region. And I wrote a piece about this in the Mississippi Free Press back just about a year ago. And some of the key pieces I say here is that, the Delta Center and the Heritage area have empowered Mississippi Delta residents and tourists to gain a better understanding of the civil rights movement in the Mississippi Delta, as well as to share their own stories. This understanding is more critical now than ever due to heightened awareness of racial and social justice issues nationwide. If we do not teach, understand, and apply lessons from our collective civil rights history, we will see it repeated again and again. And that is certainly what was happening at that time in our country and continues to happen. And so we are seeing an interest in, one of the first groups that we hosted in May of this year after our shutdown was a group from Abilene Christian University in Abilene, Texas. They brought an interracial, interdenominational group to the Mississippi Delta to tour civil rights sites because they want to have conversations. They were having conversations about racial reconciliation. And so they wanted to go to the place where history happened, where civil rights history happened, where it started. And we're seeing an uptick in that kind of activity in this day and time. But we really, our origin story as a heritage area with regard to this, really, I would say, starts with our Delta Jewels Oral History Partnership, as I mentioned before, based on the book by Alicia Burton Steele, who is a photojournalism professor at the University of Mississippi. She collected over 50 oral histories and took beautiful portraits of African-American church mothers from the Mississippi Delta. These were women who she felt were part of her grandmother's generation, her Black grandmother's generation. She's actually half Black, half white. But her grandmother's generation, she wanted to capture the wisdom of these Delta jewels. And that's where you have Delta jewels in search of my grandmother's wisdom. And the cover mother actually is from Mound Bayou, Mississippi, the historic Black town that I mentioned before, which is considered to be the jewel of the Mississippi Delta. So that's the play on with Delta jewels on this. What we learned when I met with Alicia Burton Steele for the first time, and I'd just come on board in 2014, in August of 2014, I think I met her probably in September. And it was my dissertation advisor in New Jersey at Rutgers who found an item about her work in the New York Times. And she encouraged me to, you should reach out to her and find a way if you can work together, because she knew I was coming to the Delta Center. And so I did get an opportunity to meet Alicia Burton Steele and learn from her that her publisher was not planning on doing any book signings in any of the Mississippi Delta communities where these Delta Jewels church mothers lived. We thought that was just a travesty, because here is an opportunity to build pride of place, to share these stories, to celebrate these women, many of whom lived through sharecropping, through the civil rights movement, raised families, shared recipes, was able to, just fight the odds to get education for themselves and their children, for upward mobility. And so we took it upon ourselves to do a series of community gatherings, I believe 15 of them across the state of Mississippi, mainly in the Delta, but some in other parts of the state, because the word had gotten out about what we were doing. And it was a wonderful series. These are images from some of those gatherings that we held. You'll note in the center that we went to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the Anacostia Community Museum, for a special session during Women's History Month, where we celebrated Anise P. Campbell, the cover mother of the book, and her daughters who came with her. And you'll see them up there in the upper right-hand corner with Alicia Burton Steele kneeling beside Miss Anise P. Campbell, who has passed away. But at the time, I think she was about 92 or 93 years old. And those are her two daughters with her. And so we were able, through our National Park Service connections, to take Miss Anise P. Campbell to the White House. And she thought she would never get an opportunity to do something like that, much less during the Obama administration. Was the first, she never thought she would see a Black man as president of the United States. So this was a wonderful opportunity to celebrate these church mothers. I'll go through and share with you, we did do an oral history partnership report that details kind of our approach to this. As I mentioned, there were questions that we asked. There was a thorough process that we went through in order to execute this event. I apologize, I skipped. And so we said that our purpose for doing this is about telling the Delta story. That was in our management plan, and we use the definition of interpretation that's in our management plan. Engaging residents in the process of finding, saving, telling, experiencing their own stories, and promoting increased awareness and pride in the Delta's culture and heritage. This young man here, we did this event in Jackson at a museum there that was once a school where writer Richard Wright attended, the Smith Robertson Museum. And you see Native Son there right behind him. This young man is a Mound Bayou descendant, and he introduced Alicia Burton Steele there at that event. But we use this definition of interpretation as a tool to evaluate the effectiveness of our partnership and the programs that we were doing. And so I will share that with you. But one of the challenges that we face, and again, asking those critical questions that I stated earlier, in the Mississippi Delta, many of our towns either have vestiges of segregation or they are still segregated by a bayou, by Main Street, by a railroad track. And there are certain spaces because of human geography, human practice, human traditions, we learn where we're welcome and where we're not, where we're supposed to be and where we're not, and it gets passed down from generation to generation. And so it was quite a task on the front end to identify venues where people from diverse races, age groups, and socioeconomic backgrounds would feel welcome gathering together. And so the map shows the various communities that we went to. And then this photo is from our Delta Jewels gathering in Mount Bayou, which was the largest that we had to date of the Delta Jewels. Over 30 of them showed up. And we had over 300 people in that church on a Saturday, actually during one of Mount Bayou's Founders Day celebrations. I believe it was a 128th celebration. So it was an excellent turnout, and that just fueled the momentum behind this program as we did it. We were successful with creating the safe spaces, and we did it for over 1,000 residents and visitors from diverse backgrounds. And this was really the beautiful thing about this, is that we found that these stories transcended race, age, geography. There were people who came and cried during these events. They shared their own personal stories with their grandmothers. They became really interested in gathering the stories of their elders, not just their grandmothers, maybe their fathers or uncles or mothers or fathers. And so this has been the impacts of this program, and we will, I'll share with you here the results of the evaluation. And so we said that we really did meet our purpose in terms of engaging residents in finding, saving, telling, and experiencing their own stories, and increasing awareness and pride. And you can see here the rating areas that we use. Having a better understanding and appreciation of oral history research, understanding the value of community cultural heritage and history, feeling empowered to collect their own oral history stories and families in the community were some of the key ones. And then the overall experience rating, this is on a scale from 1 to 5. This is what we got. And we had, well over 200 respondents to our evaluations. And so this program really put the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area on a map in such a way in the community, in the region, but also nationally with the National Park Service, because we ended up winning a National Park Service Centennial Award for engaging the next generation of park goers, in particular the elderly and youth. And that was one of the highlights of the National Park Service Centennial, over 1,000 residents and visitors. And so here we are proudly holding up our Centennial Awards. Next to me is my provost of Delta State University and the president of Delta State University, and our Park Service representative from Vicksburg Military Park, and then our board chair at that time, Dr. Murtis Tapp. And so these are the kind of outcomes that can occur from taking time and deliberately strategically planning events, festivals, meetings, or what have you, that with a purpose, rooted in diversity, equity, inclusion, rooted in creating a destination image that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And we felt that we were doing community healing work, quite honestly, given the history of the Mississippi Delta with racial violence, with poverty. And so that is the spirit within which we did this work with the communities that we were in, because we had various community partners working with us on this. In the aftermath of this, we've had a series of other civil rights related events that we've worked with, and we've seen a flourishing of this, and I'm just giving you a sample of a few. But I mentioned before Vera Mae Piggy, who did voting rights or voting registration out of her beauty shop. There's a group in Clarksdale, Mississippi, worked with Storyworks, which is a national organization that does interpretation around these kinds of events and stories. They got together with youth in the community and adults and researched and wrote a play about Vera Mae Piggy, and then performed it in Clarksdale, performed it on our campus at Delta State. And then right across the street is the Grammy Museum, Mississippi. Our office, we do what is called the National Endowment for the Humanities, Most Southern Place on Earth workshops for K through 12 educators. We've been doing it for the past 10 summers. And this time we were able to coordinate a reading of the play for our participants in the workshop, but also for community members to come in. So the photos that you see are actually our participants and Delta residents together watching the reading of this play. Partnering with Mississippi Humanities Council and Mississippi Today, which is a journalism, a publication there in Mississippi. And this was just a very effective and wonderful event. Afterwards, we held a conversation about the current state of voting rights in the Mississippi Delta, because that's something else that we feel is very important, is connecting the past with the present and making it relevant to people now, particularly our youth. This is another event, a project that we funded, the Voices from the Sit-In Oral History and Film Documentary Project. It has won the Mississippi Historical Society's 2020 Excellence in History Award. It's featured in 6 national film festivals, which yielded the Fort Smith International Film Festival's Best Documentary Short Film. And then this premiere just happened on October 4th, bringing people from around the region and even out of state to come view the film and to hear from the participants in the sit-in talk about their experiences on stage. And so that is our Bologna Performing Arts Center there at Delta State. We were socially distanced, but it was a very, very good turnout and very diverse turnout. We even had a group of students from Delta State who sang freedom songs to start off the program. So with these events, we have collected all of them. We use videography, digital storytelling is very important. Articles that we've written, podcasts that we're a part of, or others that are out there, and publications that we've been engaged with, and developed a Mississippi Delta Civil Rights Heritage Archive that is available on our website. It's msdeltaheritage.com. And if you go under experience there, you will see the Civil Rights Heritage Archive if you'd like to take a look at it. But we've worked with also a group, the Emmett Till Interpretive Center, which is working on a national park campaign for the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley National Park. And so partnering with them, bringing all this together under one umbrella, getting the word out about what is happening with civil rights heritage development. And that has led to the Mississippi Delta National Heritage Area being named to the National Park Service's African American Civil Rights Network. We are the first and only National Heritage Area, to my knowledge, to be named to the network. And we were the first and only to receive those National Park Service Centennial Awards. So again, these are the kinds of positive outcomes that can happen, recognition for your organization that builds trust with your community in terms of the work that you're doing, and creating more opportunities to partner, to collaborate, and to share, and to be that community empowerment, social cohesion, racial equity organization that is actively working in your region and creating that destination image that welcomes all people. So again, I want to give hats off to Calumet Heritage Area for the work that you all have done so far. I really believe that you are on the right track. I will just remind you, please be sure to ask these destination image development questions as you're thinking about using festivals and events as a strategy for tourism development, destination image development, for community engagement, all of those layered activities. There's much more to it than just throwing a party, folks. Some people look at event planning and management as something that's very easy to do, but if you're really doing it right, particularly within this context, there's a great deal of thought that goes into it. And so that concludes my presentation. I think that leaves a few minutes for us to have some Q&A or conversation. And so I'm open and ready to take all comers.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Herts. This was really just a wonderful way to wrap up some of the pieces that we've been thinking about here and there and so forth, but put into this framing is really, really helpful.
Great.
And I forgot to say this before, and you know what? We do have a Q&A feature here on this Zoom call, but the chat seems to function as well. And it might even be easier just for everybody to see questions that are placed in the chat. I'd encourage you all to do that. if you have any particular questions or comments. And while you think about those, I did have a question that came in before from somebody, one of our colleagues, who was wondering if there are any Rosenwald schools in the Delta, and if there any particular interpretation around those and of that particular project.
Yes, so there is a Rosenwald school, at least one that I know of in Drew, Mississippi. And I know in previous years there was an effort to get it restored. You can see that that attempt was made. And then I think that our center, this was before my time, actually contributed to that effort, but either to get it restored or to board up the windows so that nothing bad can happen, because the restoration stopped and halted. And unfortunately, that's a story of the Mississippi Delta. There are oftentimes projects that get started and people have the best intentions, and there's full speed ahead with a lot of it, bringing partners together, but then invariably something will happen. It's almost like, like a natural disaster. The Delta was formed over millennia by, the annual floods that came through. So it's like, metaphorically speaking, a flood comes, something happens, and it just takes everything off track. And then you're putting out fires, or you're trying to, sandbag situations. And so that's my best guess in terms of what happened with that project. But yes, there is at least one Rosenwald school there.
Mm-hmm. I would just say, just from my own perspective here, that the Field Museum, we work with many community partners. We do many events, and we always can use this good advice about how to make our use of the events strategic. Yes. And I think your framing questions are really just outstanding ones to be asked of anybody, seeking to run an event. Like, is it part of and in fact, you use the word a series of gatherings, and gathering itself is a way to bring people together. But
yes,
then when they're in series, then you are really gathering people in a way that has lasting impact. And
yes,
anyway, I just want to say this has made an impact on me.
Good.
In thinking about and some of my colleagues are with us tonight too, who might be hearing some of that same impact.
Sure. I will share with you. I'm glad that you brought that out in terms of the use of the term community gathering, because we were very intentional regarding that. Again, because we had gone through this process of finding safe spaces where people felt they could gather across various lines. And so it just made sense to call them community gatherings. And that is exactly what we called it and called them. And we did so intentionally. And the series aspect of it, yes, it's like we're stringing together these gatherings collectively, and we're creating a regional presence. So that's the whole thing about thinking and acting regionally. And even though we were doing it in libraries, we did one at a CVB in churches, a community house, so you have the diversity in terms of the structure, the places where you had it, but what they had in common is that they were welcoming and safe spaces where these conversations could happen.
So if I could just take the privilege of being the moderator, with also no one putting a question in the chat, although I do see a wonderful comment from Dr. Lowe that yes. I hope you pay attention to there. Rolando, you read it. Great. Yes. But here, so we've been working with a group of partners not far from this scene in the background of me, along the Calumet River, to create an actual community gathering space, which draws from some of our experience in designing some spaces like that on the South Chicago lakefront. And this is a really interesting idea. And last night you weren't able to join us, and the night before we had some architects on who talked about the role of particular places. And the way you've just described the gathering spaces and creating safe spaces, they are in the moment of the event. So, but I wonder if you've done any work, or the Heritage area has, about permanent spaces that have the ethic of inclusion and diversity and safe space for everybody in the conversation. Have you gotten to that? I know some heritage areas have things that kind of function like that. I'm just curious how it goes with you guys.
That's an excellent question. I think that we really operate off of the principle of meeting people where they are, right?
Beautiful.
And with that, sometimes the best you can do in some of these communities is, again, doing it in a library, in a bookstore, you know, in a museum where people feel like they can gather, at a church. And so some of those other questions, and I think they're very important in terms of how you create spaces like that, like structurally. But we are in, and I meant to mention this earlier, we are considered to be the poorest region and the poorest state in the United States, right? A lot of the funding that we have that comes in is, we depend heavily on federal funding to do a lot of the work that goes on there. And so there's a lot of kind of penny pinching going on. We do not have sometimes the luxury of creating those kinds of spaces. So we use what we have. We have to be resourceful, and we have to meet people where they are in their communities and where they feel comfortable. I will share with you, I may get in trouble with some of my colleagues at the Grammy Museum, Mississippi, but, but when that museum was built, I mean, it cost millions of dollars to get it built. And there was a grand opening that was done, and there was a gala and all of this. I mean, black tie and everything. I was able to get in there as a volunteer. I mean, like, let's be for real. And it was beautiful. It was lovely. But there were people in the community who felt that's not a space for me. That museum is not for me. It's for outside people. It's for tourists. Even though it's supposed to be telling the story of the region and the state and the music and all of that. So sometimes when you come in and you're thinking you're building something that's serving the community, in the Delta, people are going to let you know, you didn't consult with me, and you didn't consult with my family, you didn't consult with my dog and my, you know, and that's kind of the nature of these communities. So you meet people where they are and where they feel comfortable going, and you build from there. So we may get there one day in terms of actually building a structure, but we use what we have.
Yeah, no, that's great. And maybe that was an overemphasis on a particular site, because you also just said you're building regional consciousness at the same time, and a kind of the organization. Here's a quick question. I'll put it to you. It's in the chat. Given your experience around Chicago, how do you see the differences, if any, in challenges between the Mississippi Delta and the Calumet? So I'm grateful that you looked at the management plan here. There's food for thought there.
There certainly is food for thought. I mean, if nothing else, there's obviously the Great Migration connection. You know, that's clear. And so therein lies, I guess, challenges with regard to that. I'll share with you with our International Conference on the Blues back in 2018. One of our themes was the Morganfield family reunion, making reference to Muddy Waters, whose his actual name, he's a Morganfield, out of Clarksdale, Mississippi. Grew up on a plantation there and left with the Great Migration because they would not pay him. And so his was not a happy story of, I'm seeking opportunity. No, I'm leaving this sharecropper plantation where they don't appreciate me and want to keep me in poverty. So went to Chicago, of course, did what he did, became who he became. And you have two families there. You have a Chicago family and you have a Mississippi Delta based family. And what we had a young man in our office, a student at Delta State and the Delta Music Institute, who was a blues man of his own right, Keith, Prince of the Delta Blues Johnson, the great nephew of Muddy Waters. It's worked as an intern in my office. And he helped us to plan that conference, brought his family members together for the very first time at Delta State during our conference to have a discussion about what it means to be a part of that musical legacy. And not just the blues, they have an opera singer in their family and librettist. and folks who've done all sorts of other interesting things. And so, as you talk about the Calumet story, how many people are missing those family connections, don't have the opportunity to, connect in that way for whatever reason. And how might there be opportunities for Calumet National Heritage Area, I'm claiming it for you, to partner with a heritage area like ours. We're actually embarking on a Great Migration oral history art project with the Mississippi Museum of Art to bring families from the North, those Northern families, reconnecting with the Mississippi Delta and coming to the communities, their source communities, and gathering their stories. Mm-hmm. So what opportunities might there be in terms of that? So I think that's one of the obvious connections and opportunities to really engage communities in ways that are meaningful for them. And again, meets them where they are.
I am going to note there's another lovely comment here from Tom Shepard, who's worked with the Underground Railroad effort and some of those connections. But I also would also like to note that we need to transition our panel here and set up our next group. And so I think I'm speaking for everyone. If we were in a room, you would be hearing huge amounts of applause.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much for incredibly thoughtful presentation that connects the dots for us. The heritage areas, what they can be and do, this conversation around placemaking and what that means and what we do on it. And then how do we build in these stories that build racial equity, social cohesion, and community empowerment is just wonderful. And I really appreciate your time. And I hope you can stay with us the rest of the night. And
I will do what I can. I know you're at a conference. Breakfast actually, but I.
Oh yeah. No. Stay here in a conference.
I may stay tuned and eat.
But no, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Yes. Great. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
And for the rest of our attendees, we're just kind of getting organized. And it looks to me like folks are here. So I am going to move very quickly to introduce Ben Helfand and our next session, which is around organizing community green spaces. And I think the messaging here just follows just spot on from what we just heard about the importance of building from locally. And so Ben, I'm going to turn it to you to sort of introduce the panel. And really glad you're here too. And a reminder to everybody, let's go ahead and use the chat. I think it's a more open way for us to kind of process feedback and take in questions and stuff, and your comments and everything. So please feel free to use that feature. Ben, I give it to you.
Thank you, Mark. And I really enjoyed that keynote. A lot of food for thought. I am joined today first, let me introduce myself. I realize not everybody knows who I am. My name is Ben Helfand. I am the Executive Director of Neighborspace, which is Chicago's nonprofit land trust for community managed open spaces. And I'm going to delve in more deeply into what Neighborspace does. But first, I want to introduce my fellow panelists, and hopefully they can turn on their cameras. We have Curtis Whitaker, pastor of Progressive Community Church in Gary, Indiana. We have Kimmy Gordon, the founder and director of Brown Faces Green Spaces. And we have Corey Davis from Claretian Associates. Thank you all for joining the panel this evening. And I'm going to let everybody go around and introduce themselves more deeply and talk about what their organization does. But the purpose of this panel really is to talk about grassroots organizing and open space. And I think each of our organizations work on projects that come at this issue from different vantages, using different tools at different scales. And so I think through each of our stories, we'll be painting a picture of really what's possible throughout the region. And it'll be a testament to all of your groups, ingenuity and creativity, and it'll also paint a picture of what's missing, of what tools we could use, of what resources are lacking. So I think we'll be able to paint two pictures. What are we doing, and what do we need to really push this vision along? I'll begin really quick with a short intro of Neighbor Space. We are a nonprofit land trust that was created in 1996 in Chicago. We were created through a coming together of a lot of nonprofits that some of you might recognize, like Open Lands, as well as the City of Chicago, the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, and the Chicago Park District. And they were trying to figure out how to bring more open space to underserved areas. This wasn't exactly an entirely benevolent enterprise. I think there were some court cases that were pushing them to become more equitable in their approach. There were parks in the district that were neglected for decades. But something good came out of it. Several things good came out of that conversation, which was things like the Friends of the River grew out of that conversation, and a lot of reclaiming of the Chicago River in the city of Chicago. But also people started to notice that in areas where people didn't have a lot of formal open space, that they just claimed it for themselves. They squatted on city-owned land or on private land, and they started building gardens. They built flower gardens, they built vegetable gardens, sitting gardens, they built garden structures for gathering. They made small neighborhood farms. They raised chickens. They had bees, you name it. Now, this was a wonderful thing, but it also made the city's law department incredibly nervous because not everybody, but the city's afraid of getting sued if something should happen. So they had the bright idea of, let's invent something, an umbrella organization that can hold these spaces, insure them, lend them legitimacy, and help support them over time. And help kind of pull out of the shadows what was unofficial and make this official. And at the same time, we get credit for bringing open space to underserved areas. So it's kind of a win-win. So that was the birth of Neighbor Space. The city, the Park District, and the Forest Preserve came together through a 20-year agreement, which was just extended for 10 more years. And we set out to acquire these little spaces across the city. Today, we have 125 areas, 25 gardens across the city, totaling 31 acres. And it includes, spaces that are, a little bit bigger than my living room, which is where I'm standing, not the Calumet Gateway Garden, as it looks like, to sites that are, an acre and a half of riparian habitat or small farms. Small neighborhood farms in Bronzeville and in Austin neighborhood. And we're always growing. We're poised to add possibly 7 more gardens this year. It is a good model with a small amount of public investment. We leverage a huge amount of philanthropy dollars and really provide a way to hold space for community organizing. We don't do anything unless a community group does the first move. They come to us with a vision, and we step in to help preserve the land and provide resources to make those visions a reality. So, the Calumet River Garden is a partnership with Claretian Associates and other organizations in South Chicago. It doesn't exist yet, but we're pretty far along. We're poised to break ground next year. And it's going to be, this is a site that would never have happened if the community hadn't have organized. And then Neighborspace was able to step in and connect with the Water Reclamation District, Metropolitan Planning Council, and other resources. So that's kind of Neighborspace in a nutshell. It's one way of structuring and encouraging community projects. And it's an important thing to note that our government partners do contribute every year, $100,000 apiece, which is not a huge amount for them, but it's a huge amount for a small nonprofit to keep us going. And we use those funds to leverage other investments. And I realize that is not a luxury that many land trusts enjoy, to have that kind of foundational municipal support. So with that, why don't I hand things off to who wants to go next? Kimmy?
I know you were going to do that. I'm Kimmy Gordon. I'm the founder and director of Brown Faces, Green Spaces. We are an organization that promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoor spaces, promoting justice and as well in the participation of outdoor recreational sporting activities and recreational activities in the green spaces across Northwest Indiana. We seek to promote climate literacy and also eco-education in an effort to create a connection to culture in the outdoors by means of nature, and facilitating workshops and events, and which I absolutely just walked in the door from canoeing with the Wilderness Inquiry. We took we took 2 canoes out just out here on the Marquette Lagoon for some of the end of season programming. We want to provide experiences that are healing centered for our well-being. We believe all belong in the outdoors, and it's for everyone. I've been an outdoorsy person since the age of 7 when I became a Girl Scout. I followed up with my love for ecology and nature. I got my master's from SPIA. I am a SPIA grad here at Indiana University, and the mission and purpose of our organization is what I truly stand by, and we have many partners in the region, including the Nature Conservancy, Shirley Hines Land Trust. We've been working closely with the Dunes National Park Service, Indiana University Office of Sustainability, the Dunes Learning Center, Wilderness Inquiry, Isaac Walton League, and the Field Museum. Of course, Community doing tree plantings for our urban tree canopy here in Gary, Indiana, with the U.S. Forest Service and the Student Conservation Association. And the whole idea is just to get more people outdoors and in nature, cultivating relationships that are lifelong, and working with partners who have that same mission, purpose, and values that we have, and the integrity that we also share as a unit for eco-organizations in Northwest Indiana. So I'm glad to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kimmy. Why don't we go over to Claretian and hear from Corey.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Corey Davis from Claretian Associates. We're located in South Chicago neighborhood. That's 60617 area code. Specifically for this particular topic of outdoor and green spaces, Claretians does have a piece of his portfolio that lends pretty heavily to this. In both of them that I'm going to mention tonight, happen to be in conjunction with Neighborspace. So the first thing I kind of want to mention is we have a park named People's Park. It's 91st and Brandon. I'm sorry, 91st and Buffalo. And it is a park where we do programming. It's open for people for the community to just come, sit, eat. There's a stage there, and us as Claretians actually use it sometimes too for some of our own programming or celebrations and things of that nature. So this year, we didn't have as much programming as we want, and as we will next year, COVID, and everybody adjusting to things. So, however, we did have some programs this year, and we do programming here that's all community oriented, community centric. The idea behind People's Park, at least in my mind, is to give the neighborhood and people a safe space that they can come commune for several different reasons. And it wants to be continually active, so people will want to come there. We want it to be an inviting space. So with that, all the programming things that's happened this year kind of revolved around that as well. So one program that we had was a Saturday. It was called Me and My Real Friends. It was the park can be rented, right? So someone came out, rented the park through this get together, an event for the community, and right, they had food, music, and communion, right? Everyone was able to commune with each other and have a good time out in the park on a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, I believe. Likewise, we also did, in conjunction with Neighborspace, a food giveaway this year. So we allow families to come in, and they are allowed to, they would register, they get a bag of food, and we would do a Zoom cooking session. So we really use the park as a vehicle to be able to provide services and be a community partner to the community, right? That's how Claretians is probably best categorized, as a community partner. So we really like to use location to help advance that goal. People's Park is kind of one way that is helping us do that, right? And a little bit more about Claretians. While I did speak about our open space, we are, like I said, a community partner. So we are a nonprofit real estate developer. We basically work with a lot of public-private partnerships to bring about affordable housing in the South Chicago neighborhood, specifically the 60617 area code. Right, so we like to do a lot of affordable housing that targets people at 60 to 80% AMI. So we like to help the community work their way up towards home ownership. That's our ultimate goal here. We want to build a community. So, like I said, everything that we dive into is really about how do we provide some kind of service and being a vehicle. So all of our properties in our portfolio, all the residents will get case management. And so anyone who rents from us, whether they need it or not, have access and have been assigned a certain case management. So that way we can always make sure that we maintain and sustain those families. As well as Claretian also participates in violence prevention programming. I am not as versed on that as I am more of a real estate developer, but we definitely also do violence prevention. Like I said, we try to use location to be able to advance our agenda of community building.
Great, thank you, Corey. Pastor Whitaker.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening now. And I apologize, I coach my son's 9U football team, so where I'm actually out. I'm in my car now, but so it's dark outside, so I apologize. I'm Curtis Whitaker, the pastor of Progressive Community Church and the president and CEO of Families Anchored in Total Harmony Incorporated. We go by Faith CDC. And about 10 years ago, we began a journey to restore land in our neighborhood. I'm in Gary. We're in Gary. We're in the Emerson neighborhood of Gary. And the Emerson neighborhood of Gary, I'll give you some context. The block that my church is on, there's one occupied house on the whole block. The rest of the block around across the street from us is an abandoned high school. And the rest of the block is abandoned, or it was abandoned. So God laid on our heart that our sort of mission as a church is not just within the four walls of our church, but outside, that the faith community can have and make an impact on the neighborhood. So I'll give you additional context. We live in a community that has a median household income of $12,000. And so it's a depressed and blighted neighborhood. But about, like I said, 10 years ago, we began to buy the block. So we went on tax sales and we purchased all of the land, or the majority of the vacant lots and land on our block and on the block behind us. About 8 years ago, we began what's now become an urban farm on 5 of those, 5 of the 13 lots that we purchased. We're a USDA certified farm. Our goal is to help others understand about food, and we're in a food desert. So to help bring access and healthy food options to people in Gary, Indiana, specifically people of color. We've also identified that there is a correlation between access to healthy food and health. So in the African American community, there's acuity of heart disease, diabetes, and those things. And so the other part of what we do is educate and bring awareness to the fact that food is life. And we work from that perspective. But none of this happens or transpires if we did not have gained access to the land. That was vitally important. We partnered with the city of Gary, who have demolished 8 homes that were abandoned on our block and the block behind us. We have a stormwater district. They've partnered with us on compost and just others in the community, redevelopment department. I wish I could say like Ben that they partner with us financially, but that's not the case. If we were able to get $100,000 a year from several different entities, we'd probably be further along. But we're really a grassroots entity and an emerging nonprofit organization that's doing this work. Recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, we completed a pollinator garden. So we on an additional 5 parcels that we had. 2 of them we purchased, 3 of them we received from the city of Gary. We partnered with Purdue University in Lafayette. They had their landscape architect class come, and they gave us 17 renderings of our vision for a pollinator park right in the middle, in the heart of Gary, Indiana. It is our goal. We completed phase 1. In fact, let me do this. We've completed phase 1 of it. I hope you can see my screen. This is what it looks like now. Before that, I'll give you, it won't let me share anymore. Let me do this, and this. Can you see the screen? No?
We saw the last image, but we can't see it right now.
All right. So this is right across the street from the last image. So before we changed it so that it looks differently now, it looks like this. Literally right across the street is what that looked like. Imagine a abandoned house right on that corner. And then right behind that is where our farm is. And so we've taken this space, we've reclaimed it. We understand that we have others in our neighborhood that do great work, but we want to bring in phase 2 a environmental learning center right in the hood. We don't have one. We have one in the Miller area, but we don't have anything like this right in the hood. And we want to bring that right here to the hood. So it'll be right in this space. We'll have an environmental learning center along with, if you've ever been to Memphis, they have Beale Street, and you can walk into a park and you'll see folks just playing blues and singing and doing whatever. We want to have that in this space. So we're creating space for these things to happen. It is our goal that then I got this sort of thing that our community is blighted. So again, on our block, there's 1 occupied house. The block behind me, there's 1 occupied house. On this street, this is Virginia Street, 700 and 800 block of Virginia Street. One is no occupied houses. The other one is 1 occupied house. So we see that we have a tremendous opportunity to, one, reclaim the space, and then two, I look at it as a blank canvas that now we can begin to draw what neighborhoods should look like. And so part of this for us is reclaiming space, beautifying the space, but also being aware that we have a farm and we have a need for pollinators, and thus our partnership with Purdue University on the Pollinator Park. And I'll stop right there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the story and the images. It's an impressive transformation. The first thought that jumps into my head is what this must feel like to longtime residents. And I put this question to all of the panelists: is what do these types of transformations mean to the community?
I'll give you I'll give you an example. So on this park project, it was $100,000. We've gotten partnerships with some community foundations that have poured into us in our church, understanding the value of what we're trying to do, also pour dollars in. But 100% of the people in the neighborhood worked on the project. So 100%. Either they were once residents or they are residents now, but 100% of the people that worked on this project were from the neighborhood. And because of that, what we saw was people just stopping. They wanted to know what we were doing. They wanted to know why we were doing it. Why were we being engaged? They even questioned, why isn't the city doing more? And so it was real. It was a real sense of community, just awakening. Like I said, if you see blighted spaces, I just got this thought. If you see blighted spaces long enough, you become internally what you see externally. And so for this to happen, if you drop the B from blight, you get light. We believe we're shedding and shining light so that others can do the same. They can wake up and be a part of the change that we're looking to share and show.
I'd like to chime in. I'd like to also share some information about the current green spaces that we have conserved across the city of Gary, not just one particular area. What we do have in the city of Gary is plenty of green spaces from east to west that, that there are hidden jewels in each community, specifically like Ivanhoe Nature Preserve, Ivanhoe South Nature Preserve. Shirley Hines Land Trust has been working to protect the land and, the natural dune and swale there. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to touch on some of the green spaces that do exist here in the city of Gary that we're very proud of, that many groups come together and steward. Like I said, mentioned the Ivanhoe South Nature Preserve on the wider west side of Gary, between 7th and 8th and Colfax. One of the spaces that we have events at, and you'll see we do hikes there with Shirley Hines Land Trust and the Nature Conservancy. Beautiful green space that we're trying to promote more inclusion and involvement in specifically the Brunswick community. Also, you'll see Brunswick Park has been part of the conservation and preservation element of a collection of organizations coming together. And again, Shirley Hines Land Trust, the Student Conservation Association planting trees there. We had a conservation cleanup this past July there, and you could see there in the picture is Brunswick Community Center. The Gary Community Partnership came out with their youth group, and we cleaned and tidied up the front of the community center and used the park as a well-being venue for a well-being day at Brunswick Park event that we held there later in July. Ivanhoe South Nature Preserve, as mentioned, is one of the jewels on the wider west side of Gary. The Gary Greenlink Trail in Ambridge has a globally rare ecosystem of dune and swale. To be able to invite residents to that trail for use for walking, their morning walk routine or running. We had a couple biking events there with the Inner City Parks Initiative Committee are utilizing that trail and helping to maintain it. It's a beautiful space tucked away in the Ambridge neighborhood of Gary. Another beautiful preservation and green space that we have in the city of Gary is just north of the Indiana University campus. The main parking lot there, it's the Little Cow River Prairie and Wetlands area that's being restored and explored with more species. There's a trail in there along the levee that you can walk through. It's just over half a mile.
Hey, Kimmy, if you're talking, I know I can't hear you.
Ecology.
Oh,
And
you're back.
mhm.
Yeah, you're going in and out.
Yeah.
We have jewel parks. We do have a lot of green spaces in Gary that are open and available for use. We're working with the city to try to get the parks up and running, one in each neighborhood of the city of Gary, making progress. Tolliston will be getting updates. Roosevelt.
Can I ask you what you mean? Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by getting the city to get them up and running? What is, yeah. Where are they not running? Yeah.
I'm probably going to lag for a second here. Sure, I can talk about the park. Well, what I will say is that, well, particularly this summer, there was a switch in management or the person who oversees. There's a lot of issues going on with parks. We've got only a few parks, but namely the main park, Marquette Park, gets lots of attention and love, looks amazing, but it's not the only green space here in Gary. That's for the people and for our well-being and to nurture our inner spirits and souls. I believe that each neighborhood should have a park and that each of those parks brings a different element of community to a neighborhood, and that we're all deserving to have something like that outside of our homes. To be able to go outside in your neighborhood and visit a green space that's well maintained and cut on a regular basis. We've had a lot of issues with a lack of services. Some parks have been, I want to say, restored to their natural state, is what what's being said. But in essence, I feel that there could be a lot more put into the parks, to each park and each neighborhood, and that it's important for a community in a neighborhood to have a park where kids can play, have basketball courts and baseball fields and working equipment that's not broken or faded, and a park that looks nice, that's nicely maintained and with the hedges trimmed, and it gives a sense of community. And the city is we've been there's a group of us that go to the Parks Board meetings regularly to voice our need and our desire to have this for the residents of Gary, because it's so very important. Like over COVID, when we were all stuck in the house, we couldn't go anywhere. Those green spaces are vital for urban neighborhoods to access, and it's the urban neighborhoods that don't have access to them or have parks that are well maintained.
And I would just add to that, and Gary, and she is exactly right. Part of the issue is funding, and so there is like I shared with you, we have one occupied house on our block. So the majority of the neighborhood that I am in is like that. So therefore we have a tax-based issue. And so what we've done, understanding what Kimmy has just mentioned, that in the urban and where I am, where Black folk are, I don't have a park near me. I do, but it's not maintained. And so what we believe is, why try to maintain? The city has like 40 parks, they maintain one. And it's not that they don't want to maintain them, it's that they don't have the financial and human capital to do it. So what we're suggesting is, why don't you get smaller parks, pocket parks, or what I call them, place them throughout neighborhoods. They have their own character, their own flavor. And that's what we've done. And that's what we're looking to show. Hey, this can happen. Doesn't cost a lot, but then let the neighborhood take care of it. It's 5 parcels. So now neighbors adopt this park and you have some place. So every 5 blocks, you have a different 5 parcel park that people can go to and call their own.
And I'm kind of going to jump in the ownership piece, right? Because the ultimate goal, I think, a lot of for most of these parks is community building, right? It's having something for people and community, and people want to. The more they interact with it, the more they're going to feel like it's like they're a part of it, and that it's theirs, and they're going to want to see it maintained. They're going to want to see it taken care of, and they're going to help those that are in charge, keep accountability, right? So that way you can have programming like Parisians likes to do, things like, live events, music in the park, kids painting, collaborative efforts with partners to give away food, being able to rent the park out, things like that. Doing those kinds of items and making sure the community is involved, knows about it, and is there, and the park is in a very visible space, really kind of helps maintain the park itself, right? It kind of feeds into itself because people feel that ownership. And one thing I also want to say is, like, in conjunction with that, your environment really helps affects your mental health and your regular health, right? Health and mental health are a function of your environment. So having good outdoor spaces where people can go get fresh air, are encouraged to get outside, be physically active, right? Some parks are in conjunction with each other, so they may be gardens, things like that. Makes people think about what they're eating, that kind of thing. So it's really a holistic kind of approach when you think about the different efforts that are put into trying to maintain parks and develop them along the way. The green space, the Calumet River Green Garden that Ben has behind him that we're doing in conjunction with them, right? It's going to provide a whole new outdoor experience for that community, right? It's going to be a garden, but it's also going to be a natural play space for children that doesn't really fully exist right now. There's playgrounds, there's a couple things that people's park for them to climb on, but there's nothing where they use this, kind of naturally existing things as a place for kids to have outdoor fun and encourage healthy living. So I just wanted to mention the holistic approach to everything.
Now everybody's touching on the necessity, in our view, of having these hyper local outdoor spaces, not just like one destination fancy park, but things within a couple of blocks of where you live. And the benefits in terms of community building, accessibility, and the opportunity for like hands-on participation that comes with that kind of locality. So I'm wondering, it's a vision I think we all share. Kimmy, the idea that every neighborhood deserves a high functioning park. Or Curtis, you're talking about, every 5 blocks, one of these spaces, a small farm or a small prairie. garden. So I'm wondering what are the barriers standing in the way of this vision that seems so clear to us?
I want to interject. I think, getting the community, like, you have a zip code that has, a whole coalition of people ready to speak up when the local store's hedges are not trimmed. But then on the other flip side of town, you just have people wanting to get their foot of grass in their park mowed. So, we have to ask ourselves, how do we reach the people to allow them to know what's important in their communities and to advocate for their parks and outdoor is outdoor. You can go outside of your front door and be outdoors. So there's no one who can say, oh, I don't do the outdoors. You do the outdoors every time you step outside. And so we have to take advantage, and I believe, of course, in upcycling and recycling, but we have beautiful parks here. We just need to dig them out. They are there. They need a little work. People, there's on 2nd and Buchanan, or was that 21st and Buchanan, there's a park there. Pine Park, it's 22nd and Buchanan, there's a group of neighbors. Now the park is overgrown. There's a basketball court there ready to be used, but it's just overgrown. But there's a space that the neighbors went and cultivated to build a community garden. They realize the worth of that space. So they come together and they use that land and use that area in that park. We have to get people out in the parks, get people to realize what's there and value it. And it's for their own neighborhoods and communities, and upcycle or, maintain those parks, get people to realize their worth. And so I think, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious, was that just one neighbor? Was that an organized group that decided to reclaim that space?
There's parks all over Gary being reclaimed. Hatcher Park is being reclaimed, and that particular park, it's not reclaimed. It's overgrown and it's a mess, but they cut out a little area of land for themselves to use as for a community garden. They would love to have that park up and running, but oftentimes, Ben, people don't know how to make that first step in advocating. We have to teach people how to advocate for their neighborhoods, just the same as they would advocate for trash services. We have to teach our residents how to advocate for what's important for them and to them right outside their doors in their outdoors. Mm-hmm. And it's all over Gary. We have these parks, and I can look at a park that's just completely been neglected and see the beauty there. We don't have to rebuild and renew. We can use what we have if we would just have enough love and concern for these areas and people to realize their value and advocate for those spaces. Come to the park board meetings. Like Ambridge, they collectively, came together and said, hey, what about our park? If we can get people to these spaces to nurture and care for them, and groups like Brown Faces, we create programming in these spaces. That's how you get people to care and advocate for what they can have and what they are deserving of too. To lead a people to have a voice, but sometimes we don't know where to start. As a culture, we just don't think there's a place to start.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think we see it a lot at Neighbor Space in Chicago. People feel like they don't have permission. And we're often in this weird role of permission giving. And I'm like, by what authority do I have to give anybody permission for anything? But I have so many conversations with community groups where I'm saying, yeah, you can do this. Like, yeah, you can reach out to your alderman, your state senator, and ask for what you want. And people are very, very reluctant. I don't quite know why all the time, but one of the roles of like folks like this group is permission giving. I feel like.
I think part of the reluctancy is so we asked for permission to clean up a park because there is some liability that may exist to the city. So if I get hurt on a city park, I didn't ask for permission to go, then they're gonna say that's your fault because you shouldn't have been on the park in the first place. So I think, that's part of it. I'll go back to, we can clean up a park. We did that when I first became pastor 10 years ago. We adopted a park. We cleaned it every 2 or 3 weeks. We cleaned it. We had some of the neighborhoods. Problem is those weeds keep growing and you get weary. That's what happened. You get folks that just get weary because then they say, I'm paying taxes, and why am I paying taxes and I got to go out there and clean up this space? Why doesn't the city do it? And they don't understand that the city doesn't have the financial or human capital to clean this, to do that. They don't. They have probably 9 people working in the general service department, and they just don't have the resources to do that. And so we've taken a different approach. We said, you know what we'll do is we'll reclaim some space. We're not asking anybody. We don't have to ask anybody for permission to buy land that's there. So we'll buy the land. We'll ask the city to donate some land to us. And from those two perspectives, we can say, we don't need a huge park. We don't need, 5 blocks. Why not 5 parcels? They're small, they're maintainable. We can maintain them if we need to. It's just a different approach to how things are done. Like I said, in where I am in Emerson, there isn't a pollinator garden. And so we endeavor to create one so that the individual, one, we have a farm and we need pollinators, but 2, so that individuals who don't know about, pollinators can come and learn, here it is, without having to go outside of their neighborhood. And this can be all over. 5 parcels is not a lot of space. And that's one way to rebuild and reclaim unused and vacant space. At least I think so.
Kimmy, you're going to jump in there?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't think it's that the park doesn't have the manpower and the money. It's that they don't allocate the money. I'm not going to allocate monies or find monies for what I feel is not important. I'm not going to allocate monies to my dessert budget because it may not be important to me right now. I mean, it's all about allocation. We have to find a way to hold the city and our officials accountable. Just like these pollution, these chemical spills over in our water. They're putting millions and millions of dollars into tourism. How are you going to have tourists here who want to swim in a chemical-filled lake? And Gary has the worst air pollution in the nation, not the state, not the region, the nation. How are we spending so much money and allocating so much money to a brand new casino on Burr Street when we're not caring for the areas that lead to it? Truck stops here, truck stops there, industrial, but here's a brand new casino. We have to demand as a unit and a people to understand that our health is at risk, or respiratory diseases because of air pollution and, chemical spills that go up into the air, that you can plant 1 million trees and 1 million garden plots, but we're still, being polluted when it rains, it goes into vegetables and soils. So to get to the root and the nucleus of what needs to happen is that the city and the officials and the government, Governor Holcomb, and, we have to hold these people accountable for what we feel is important, not what they feel is important or what part they feel is important, but, we have to advocate for our spaces. There is money for it, just have to find it. and that is how Tolliston and Roosevelt are being upgraded. They found the money, but we have to advocate for it. And, you know, I am for all of Gary green spaces. We have some beautiful green spaces, and getting the people out to visit them, creating programs for our group, our communities, our culture, and us in the outdoors, and getting us to nurture and appreciate those spaces. Someone has to stand up, speak up, advocate, a group of people, partnerships. We have to get to the root of what's important to us and what we demand as citizens. And sitting back and making 311 responder requests is not going to do it. But getting out there in the community and saying, you know what, I'm not going to sit back and wait for somebody to say, can you cut the park? And then asking them a month later, can you cut the park? No, I'm going to build relationships with people and let them know how important this is to me. And, you know, in doing that, getting more people to advocate in that same way and to appreciate these spaces and to demand that there be, allocation of funds for what is important. And that will be on that list, the Gary Green spaces. So that advocation is key. That's key. It really is. And it works. It might work slowly, but it does work.
Yeah, there are few better and more visible forms of advocacy than a big group of people out there sweating and digging, picking up trash. The only danger with that is if municipalities start to expect that as a replacement for city services. So it's figuring out what that balance is.
You're exactly right. All this summer, my son and myself, because of lack of equipment this summer, it wasn't winterized from what I'm understanding. So we had only like a few mowers out of, 15 or 20 city mowers. There were only maybe 4 or 5 running. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but it's somewhere in there. So my son and myself were going across the street and cutting the park with a mower from borrowed from the Little League. And it was a rider mower. It took about 3 hours every 10 days. But you see, if you keep doing it and then you're putting in that request, then, oh, she's got it, or they have it over there, or this group has that. That group, or we, or our neighbors and our residents, we have to say, no, I'm a little bit booked these next 2 months, and I really, really need this part to be cut. And you don't stop asking. You make it make sense. You make it a need. You advocate for it, because if we kept doing it, the city would never come and do it. And then after that request, they did it once. They came back 2 weeks later and did it again. It was a really feel-good moment to know that that burden was lifted off of me, and that if the city just strategized a little bit better, and I know this summer was kind of hectic with some, position moves and some redirecting and reorganization, but it can happen. So, the burden is off, not so much on that group or the community to be responsible for these spaces, but again, advocacy, advocating for your neighborhoods and parks and green spaces.
So we only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to make sure I pull a couple of questions from the chat. Kimmy, there was a question, a very specific question about the Little Calumet Basin Commission and creating access around the Chase Street Artesian Spring, and one person wondering if that is still happening and why hasn't started yet.
Okay, last October, we partnered, Brown Faces Green Spaces partnered with the Isaac Walton League of Northwest Indiana. And we did a conservation cleanup over between 32nd and over by the Artisan well. There's a natural spring well that's only one of 14 left, I think, in the area. If not the state of Indiana, I'm not sure. but it is a very rare fountain of spring water, an artisan spring well that's purified naturally. It's been there for as long as I can remember. Again, showing that you care about the space. But we pulled out a lot of stuff, and then maybe that was in October. So maybe a few months later, here we are again going back there, and there's 4 tires laying there. We have to allow again the Calumet River Basin Authority. I think that's Dave Castellanos. I do have his email, and he's always been very responsive if I email him. And he provided the dumpsters for those cleanups. But you're right, that's a beautiful space. If you go there at the footbridge located at around 31st and Chase, you could turn in back there. If you're there on that footbridge at sunset, it's one of the most beautiful views of the Calumet River that you could see in this region. And it's right here in Gary. And in knowing the beauty and the purpose of that space, you got people going back there and dumping. There has to be something done. The Calumet River Basin Authority, I think, is involved to some degree with the cleanups and providing us, resources to be able to do it. But it's the maintenance. I would like to see more responsibility and accountability of them helping to maintain that space, because it's so beautiful and it's right here in Gary. But is it because it's in Gary that it looks like that, or it's not maintained? Our vice president on our board, Nate George, he's an avid cyclist, and he drives the trail all the way from east to all the way into Hammond, or Whiting sometimes. He noticed that the trail, same trail, maintained by the same people, the same group and organization, that the trail from Gary to when you hit Hammond or Whiting, or when you're in Gary, you're running over glass, reflectors, overgrown brush. But when you leave Gary and go into that same trail, follow it along, that they have signs and nicely manicured edges along the trail, and advocate for that. And so we have to, again, get people to understand the value of these spaces and advocate for them. That trail now is very tidy, thanks to Nathaniel George. He put in some effort, but the groups that he contacted, and that was including, I think, Lake County Parks. I believe some of that had to do with along the Calumet River, so Dave Castellanos was involved. They're receptive to our advocacy and wanting it to be better for us. But I think, when there's nobody speaking and then nobody's watching, they think maybe, we don't matter. So it's that advocacy. I think Dave Castellanos at the base is receptive, but again, advocacy.
Well, I was going to say, in addition to advocacy, it sounds like any route forward involves creative partnerships. And, in the stories that you guys have told, Corey partnering with my organization and other organizations in your neighborhood, Kimmy, you're referring to dumpsters being donated. Curtis, even with the city of Gary, them paying for the demolition of certain houses on lots that you then took over. So these, partnerships, even if they're not as generous as we would want, are crucial to moving forward. In the chat, there's been some, musings about larger partnerships and funders with, U.S. Steel Corporation. So I'm wondering, what kind of larger partnerships do you think are necessary to move these visions forward, to have the kind of maintenance, the ongoing maintenance that you want to see, given the limited resources in the city of Gary and in the region?
And Ben, I'm just going to leap in to just say we need to wrap the session
Okay,
here.
that's the last question then. Yeah.
And so that can be maybe the last word, a word from each of our wonderful panelists, and I'm just pointing out, but a minute to go.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just say first off, thank you for having me and Faith Farms and Orchard to share today. I'm really excited about. I was on the other day and just heard some great things. So really excited about all that's happening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, thank you as well for providing Christian with our panel. I really enjoyed sharing, and I learned a lot as well.
Thank you, Corey. Kimmy, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm reading the comments and someone chimed in about, okay, funding. Brenda, it's about funding and why should a private entity require the city to, upkeep? That's another conversation, Brenda. I acknowledge your question, and that'll make me think later on this evening. But Ben, thanks so much for having me. This is a great discussion, and it's going to allow me to delve deeper into some issues that probably need to be, touched on in advocating for our green spaces and opening up a conversation with our administration.
Yeah, thank you, Kimmy, and thank you, Reverend Whitaker. I knew a little bit about Gary, but it was really wonderful to learn more. Corey, I already knew a lot about South Chicago, but always good to talk with you. And for the three of you and for everybody else, please feel free to reach out to myself and Neighborspace to learn more about our model and the community-driven grassroots land trust model that we represent.
And thanks so much. And thank all of you on the panel for just a really invigorating conversation about a role that, as you were teeing it up there, Ben, for larger partnerships. And this is certainly something for this heritage area partnership to take in and to think about how to connect people in just this way on the issues that are similar in different places, but need some, often are helped by bigger numbers. I loved your point about one great form of advocacy is seeing people out there together doing the cleanup. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. And in fact, I'm going to sort of pivot to the next presentation, which actually I several things from what was in the previous presentation and panel have me put me in mind. First of all, Dr. Herts talked about finding, saving, telling, and experiencing great stories in the places. And then Ben asking the question to each of the panelists just now, what do these even gardens, what do they mean? That's about the experience. These are, in some ways, these are the sorts of experiences that should be put on the map, which is to which point I'm driving. The other thing is we heard Pastor Whitaker talk directly about a pollinator garden as part of of course, it's in service of a lot of other of the mission that Pastor Whitaker's unearthed here to move forward. But a pollinator garden is one way to tell a story and one way to bring it back into it tells a story about nature, but it tells a story about people's engagement with nature and what people together can accomplish. And so that's kind of the big story. We're about to have a session here, and it's titled a workshop, but I really hope you can stay and think about this. And we're going to open up a set of slides in just a second to walk through it, and we'll show you what the slide is. But what it's about are, in the advocacy, finding all these points of light. Every point on the map is a story, and we're going to talk about how to get the points onto the map, and we're going to do that right now. And so I'm going to introduce this session, and I hope you can see my screen here. And I'm going to also introduce my colleague from the Field Museum, Karen Klinger, who's done an amazing job with this map. And I just want to set it up briefly because we are going to be talking about pollinators, but we're going to talk specifically a little bit about monarch butterflies as an example. We all know the monarchs are in trouble. They make this amazing migration every year back, and they're just headed back now, back to this one forest in Michoacan in central Mexico, and then they turn around and come north again. And an amazing story of migration every summer. But we know they are in trouble, and the populations are in decline. And you can see the trend right here. And the estimates are that, generally speaking, we need, and the monarchs require milkweed on which to lay their eggs and other native plants, but we think we need about 1.8 billion additional milkweed stems to sustain the population. Turns out city people have a very important role in nature. And when city people are engaged and they advocate and they take the steps that we just saw, they can make a defined contribution to nature. Now, when monarch butterflies arrive in Chicago, downtown Chicago, they might see a lot of urban land. We now have some new mapping tools that show us that urban land that 10 years ago, we would have mapped it out and said, that's the city, you can't see anything there. But actually, we now have mapping tools that bring us down to less than like a square yard in size. And these are the green spaces on the near south side of Chicago, which includes backyards, school gardens, pollinator gardens, parkway gardens, community gardens, and some bigger green spaces as well. It all matters, and it all rolls up, and people have engaged with the monarch issue and other pollinator issues in a really important way. How can we count that? We've begun to estimate that the opportunity to add stems of milkweed towards that 1.8 billion is especially strong in residential areas. So this is to things like the 8 lots that Pastor Whitaker just talked about, or maybe even the Calumet River Garden. Other places like rights of way, very strong potential. And there's different ways to get there. And people do this for a variety of motivations. And we just heard some brilliant comments about, especially now in these days in the time of pandemic, what motivates people. They need a release that reminds them of their childhood. They want to do something for nature. They want to do something with their community partners towards a community end. There's a variety of reasons. And now, and in the conversation we're having tonight, national heritage areas have picked up on this and have embraced Operation Pollination. 3 pilot geographies, one in central North Dakota National Heritage Area, the Motor Cities National Heritage Area, and the Abraham Lincoln National Heritage Area in central Illinois. The Calumet Heritage Partnership 2 years ago embraced this Operation Pollination and approved the idea of moving forward on it. And tonight we're going to report on some of the early possibilities and outcomes from that. People can take action, and they can do it in various ways. And some of those are to organize people, to advocate and engage, people getting basic education and making some policy changes. Organizing and engaging includes taking a pledge. There's 75 municipalities in the Calumet Heritage Area geography. Would be nice if any one of the local government leaders took this Mayor's Monarch Pledge. You can see they would be in good company across the United States. There are many fantastic community events. Kimmy just described a few of them. Of course, the East Chicago Monarch Festival is a really wonderful one. There's all kinds of ways to get involved outdoors. We're going to describe some of these. Karen will come to this in just a moment. These are the things that should be on the map. We should be able to say behind each of these efforts is a story, is a way in which people are asserting their right to have the nature that is good for themselves and good for the planet. Native garden ordinances, again, those 75 municipalities, some of them actually actively discourage native plantings. Sometimes there are ordinances that seem to be a little bit more in favor. So what do those look like? In any case, a lot of the tools that now exist to think about pollinators, to plan for them, to build this into thinking at the regional scale and to capture these great stories are at this one-stop shop here, the Monarch Joint Ventures site, which is a kind of a hub for all kinds of tools. And we are going to turn now to this map, and the point of the map is to get your work onto the map. And so that this is where I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, and we're gonna come over to Karen here. And hi, Karen. And we're gonna open up the Pollinator asset map.
Yes, I will share my screen and hopefully let me make sure it's looking good. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so thanks, Mark. Thanks for that introduction. So I just put the link to our website in the chat. This is the launch, as you saw in the email that was sent out. So we're happy to get any feedback or any questions that you have. Feel free to put that in the chat as we go through the website, and we'll have some time at the end to open that up and talk about that. So we'd love any feedback that you have. So I'll just walk through the website so you get an idea of what we're doing. In addition to the map that Mark was describing, we also have some information about this project, about pollinators, and as well as some pollinator resources. So when you first go to that link, you'll come to an introduction about the Calumet Pollinator Asset Project. And through this project, we're hoping to learn more about the pollinator resources that are available within the Calumet Heritage Region, so we can get a big picture view of how we can make a difference for pollinators. These resources include both assets for pollinators, like habitat found in native plant gardens, and assets for people interested in pollinators, including native plant nurseries and sales, cultural events, and pollinator programs. While we have started to populate this map, we are looking for your help to fill in the gaps. When you scroll down, you can read more about why pollinators are important, what's happening to them, and how we can help. You can hover over any of these cards to read more information about each topic. If you're reading on a phone or a touchscreen device, you can actually just tap on the card to read more. Finally, we want to thank our partners and funders, including the Field Museum, Calumet Heritage Area, and Cleveland Cliffs. Next, we'll take a look at the Pollinator Resources page. Just like on the first page, you can scroll over any of these cards to read more information about the topic that you see on the front. On the first card, you can read about how cities can make a difference for pollinators. Like Mark was describing, our research at the Field Museum found that urban areas, large and small, can contribute up to 1/3 of the 1.8 billion stems of milkweed that are needed to help stabilize the eastern monarch butterfly population. Metropolitan areas offer the opportunity to engage millions of people in conservation efforts, including participating in community programs and creating native habitat in their own backyards. This leads into our second card, which explains some of the benefits of planting native gardens for pollinators. Our third card in this row has links to a number of the Field Museum's field guides, so you can learn how to identify many of our native pollinators, including butterflies, bees, moths, flies, and wasps. On the second row, we provide a variety of resources for planting and maintaining your native garden. This includes things to consider when planning your garden, as well as when you're ready thinking about what plants to plant. So we have a few guides to some like the Field Museum's Rice Native Gardens, as well as if you were specifically looking at creating monarch habitat. We also have, when you're ready to purchase those plants, we have a list of websites where you can go to find local plant sales and nurseries near you. And you can also check out our website, the Pollinator Asset Map page, which we'll go to in a minute, to actually see those on the map. And then finally on this row, we have a card about what you need to know about pesticides and why you should consider avoiding or limiting their use. In the final row, we have a few cards with ideas on how to make a larger impact and spread the word about pollinators. On the first card, you can read about some opportunities for getting involved with a community science project to contribute to a larger scientific effort. For example, this first project here is the Field Museum's Monarch Community Science Project. That is wrapping up this week. We have a final presentation this Saturday, and I'll put a link in the chat if you're interested in registering for that event. But basically, this project asks community members around the Chicagoland area, including the Calumet region, to collect data about monarch eggs and caterpillars that they see on the milkweed plants that are in their yard. So if you're interested to learn more, you can visit our website linked here. So on the second card, we have some information about how you can register your native or pollinator habitat. And you can also pledge your efforts to show your commitment to pollinators. And on the final card, we have some information about examples of pollinator advocacy, including encouraging your mayor to sign the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. So we have some information and a link here, as Mark was describing. And we also have a description, as Mark was also saying, about an example where in Chicago, they recently passed an ordinance to create a registry for native and pollinator gardens. So now we're going to take a look at that pollinator asset map. So when you first click on the map, you'll see a pop-up that describes what this map is about and how you can help. In the center is the map, and you can scroll in using your mouse. You can also use the plus and minus buttons found in the top left corner. And if you're on a touch screen, you can use the pinching motion. In the top right, there is a search bar. So you can search for a specific locations, and you can zoom in to that area. Underneath that search tool is a base map tool, so you can actually change the background imagery. So if this imagery is a little too hard to see, you could change it to, for example, this OpenStreetMap, which has data that's actually been, it's a community project where people can actually contribute locations to this map. On the right-hand side is the help button, which gives you some information about how to use the survey on the left, which we'll talk about, as well as guiding you around the map, and some information about the data sources that were used to pre-populate this map. Underneath is the layers list. So you can click on the triangle to expand that list. And each of these layers you can turn on or off by clicking on the eye. So if I turn off the private gardens, that makes some of the other layers a little more visible. We can also scroll down and see that there are some reference layers. So this includes the Calumet Heritage Area boundary. We also have waterways and protected lands, which will show up once you are zoomed in. Underneath this layer list is the legend, and this will update with the layers that are currently turned on or off. So as I turn these layers off, they will disappear from the legend. So this lets you identify what you're seeing on the map. I can see that these green squares are private gardens. To learn some more information about one of these asset locations, you can click on it with your mouse, or on a touch screen, you can just tap it. And you can see, for example, here was a point that was recently added just this week. You can see the name of the garden, a description of it. We can see that it was registered with the Shirley Hines Land Trust, and as well as the address and city and state information. We can also see nearby is another native plant sale, as well as an example of an event. This one was put on for the Indiana Audubon Society. And by clicking on the view button, we can actually visit its website. So we can also, now we can take a look at the survey. And this is how you're going to add your locations to the map. So if you use this survey, your point will appear just like any of these other points on the map. So on the first page is an introduction to the survey, which gives you a little bit of information about what this survey is about. We estimate that it should take about 5 to 10 minutes. So you can just click next. And then first you'll be prompted to enter in your name. This won't be visible in the on the map. As you saw, we have select fields that are visible, but it is helpful for us, especially if we need to reach out to follow up with any information. Next, if you are affiliated with an organization, you can put that in here. So on the next page, this is where you select what kind of asset. So as we see here, these are the kind of assets we're currently looking for: native plant sales and nurseries, events, programs, private gardens, public gardens, as well as we have an other column. So there may be things we're not thinking about. We'd be happy for you to add that in, and maybe we will incorporate that as its own symbol. And also, if you have any thoughts, please go ahead and put that in the chat as well. There's definitely some things we may not have considered. So depending on the asset type you select, so let's say I'm going to do a garden, it's going to first ask me whether it's a private or public garden, if it is registered as pollinator habitat. So some examples you can see here include Monarch Way Station Program, West Coast Wild Ones, native plant landscapes, et cetera. So we also saw just before there, Shirley Hines was another place that you could click on. So if you click yes, you will be given the opportunity to say what organization it is registered with. Next, if your garden participates in a community science project, such as the Monarch Community Science Project I was describing, you can click yes, and you can describe that here. Finally, we're asking you for a name of your asset. This is a required field, as you can see from the red asterisks. You could just say my Monarch Garden, but this allows us on these points to have something to label it with. So please go ahead and enter in some information. So let's say it's my garden. And then you can say if the asset belongs to an organization and if you have a website. So that was how we were able to click that view button earlier. So if you do have a website to add, please make sure to do that. And finally, you have the option to add a short description. So if I've filled out all the fields correctly, then I can click next. And this is the last page. So this is the key to getting your point on the map, is giving us a location. You'll see underneath there is this red bold message to enter a location within the Calumet Heritage area. If you do enter a location that is outside of this area, it will stay there. So this is just to let you know that your location is not currently in the map. However, once you have selected a location, that will disappear. If you do just put in a city and state, which you're welcome to do, the point will appear at the city center. And this is a really smart search button. So you can, of course, put in start typing in the name of a place. You don't have to necessarily have the specific address if it is a place that would be identified in the map. And then finally, the last field is the option to add an image to be associated with your garden. So if you have a garden you want to add a picture of, or something, a picture for the event, you can upload that here. And then finally, once you're ready, you'll click submit, and maybe with a quick refresh, you will see that that point come back on the map. Mark, feel free to let me know if I've missed anything. But we would now really love to give you the opportunity to add your assets to this map. So again, if you go to bit.ly/Calumet pollinators, that's all one word with a capital C, you can click on the pollinator asset map page, and you can start entering your pollinator assets one at a time. If you have any questions or feedback, like I said, we'd love to hear it in the chat. And then once, after maybe 5 or 10 minutes, we will take a look at the map and have a discussion about kind of looking at that collective impact.
I'm acknowledging that Pastor Whitaker's at a spot where he can't really add it in. He what is probably not on the map, and we'd love to add him to the map. So maybe one option here is to just throw the address into the chat, and we can get started, and we can see it on the map. I'm wondering about the Calumet River Garden. I think there are neighbor space sites listed.
Yes.
So that might actually be on the map.
That does remind me, I do want to emphasize that it will have slightly different, this website will have slightly different looks depending on the screen you're looking at. So if you are looking at this website on a phone, this is somewhat what you're going to be looking at. So you'll find the menu button up in the top left corner that you can use to navigate. And that asset survey is going to be available by clicking that asset survey button. It was a little too much to fit on a screen of a cell phone size. So you would just click on that button and it will open up that survey into a separate page.
Karen, can I read you Reverend Whitaker's address, and we can do a mock-up?
Yeah, let me put into the.
It's what should we call it? Faith CDC Pollinator Garden. And we can correct this as we go.
Public, yeah.
Yeah.
Faith CDC.
FAITH, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Faith Farms and Orchard. Oh no, that's a different address. Or is it the same address, 656 Carolina? Is it around the block? Different. Okay, great. Cool. So we're so let's go with 7th and Virginia and see what that looks like when you just put in and for Faith, in caps. And let's enter the organization, Faith, and we can skip to the. I'd say let's do the required ones, and we can always go back and edit these. But this at least gets us a chance to see something come on in real time. That's in Gary, and look, it knows it's Gary.
There it is.
Great.
And we can see that point the red bar didn't disappear. So our location is good to go.
Good. So let's submit it. And then you probably want to refresh, right? Yeah. And let's see.
Sorry. The danger of doing a live demo. Let's see. Oh, there it is. There's our point.
There it is. Great. And so this is to the point, and those looks to me like those that are those the hoop houses just to the south of that point? And Reverend Whitaker says yes. And so one thing is that given the amazing story he just told, this is just the general point I want to make about this, is that behind each of these assets is essentially a story, a piece of heritage of the region, a gathering place that taken collectively adds up to some of those big regional scale things. The idea is to capture those on the map. We're hoping that folks might, as you're noodling around on this site, might be trying this yourselves. If you are actually doing that and you want us to kind of spotlight it, throw that into the chat as we go. Let me just check the chat and make sure. Yeah, the space is west of the hoop houses. we have a comment here, Karen. For places that don't have addresses or spots in large parks, there's an app called What 3 Words that locates places using a 3-word code that changes every square meter or so.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know how if this works with this. We originally did have a different way to locate it, which was using a map, but that can be also difficult to work with. So we were kind of trying this out with the address bar, but we'd be happy to know if, if people have, if it works or if there's any issues with that as well.
There's a question here as well about, are the county forest preserves participating? Can their restoration sites be entered?
Yeah, I will say we do have, like I said, we do have a protected lands layer, which has some information. Let me change it back.
Why don't you go to Eggers Woods if you can search? Let's see what happens.
Did I spell that right?
ERS.
Ah, there we go. There's a zoom. You can do a zoom in here.
So there it is. So as a polygon, in this case, it's an area.
Yeah, so we've added these as protected lands, but we are happy for people to go ahead and add points on top of that that would reference any specific pollinator gardens at these locations, and to help get that picture.
Yeah, and I would think that it would be especially important to catch those places where school groups and volunteer groups are at work, so they can see their work on the map and it can be pointed out to them.
Yeah, I think this is a great way, like we were saying, how we heard about 2 pollinator gardens recently that I wouldn't necessarily know of otherwise. So I think this is a great way for people, if you do live in one of these areas, is to kind of explore what is in your area and maybe learn about things, places you didn't know, or maybe you want more of in your neighborhood, and looking into the resources and working with your community members to kind of add more spots on those map. Some of the organizations we looked at, like they're looking to build these like corridors of habitat. So that's hopefully one of the things we can take away from this map, is seeing these areas where these points are starting to appear to tell us that, this is an area where there's a lot of potential green space and habitat, but maybe there's areas that would really benefit. We can kind of keep growing those corridors for wildlife and specifically pollinators.
Maybe we can zoom in South Chicago there, and seeing a couple of points.
Yeah.
I have my own little difficulties picking out some of the point. There we go. When we change the base map, easier to see. Chicago Park District has the edge of Lake Michigan there. That scattering of points represents pollinator assets that are close to both Steelworkers Park and Calumet Park. One of the things that the pollinator research is saying is like Karen just said, the more we can connect these patches to each other, or, of course the critters are flying from one to the next, so they got to be close enough in flying distance. The more connectivity you have, which is it's good for people. It's also good for habitat. So that's one of the things you could do with this. You could actually draw a circle around each one of these squares of a certain size, of like, what is the range of this for a particular bee or butterfly, that matters if it's been seen here. Okay, what typically does it need nearby, and start to put those circles together and see some kind of a corridor. And what I'm talking about right now is like, how would you use this tool? Like, I'm just brainstorming here about how working with some ecologists, I might want to work the tool. Can you see? Oh, Victoria, I'm so glad to see you here. That is a great question. This is a wonderful tool. I'm curious about your thoughts on how regular gardeners would be motivated to go through the steps to engage in data gathering.
Well, I would say, I'm not sure specifically the kind of data gathering you may be saying, but like I said, we have this Monarch Community Science project that we're, again, I'll copy before I forget, I want to copy the link into here to register. So we're having this wrap up event Saturday, but we had over 170 people submit their milkweed gardens to be monitored this summer. And so we had over 100 people who every week were going out there and looking at their milkweed plants and counting up the number of monarch eggs and caterpillars that they were seeing, as well as telling us about some of the other things that they were seeing and submitting that data every week. So we had over 1,800, yes, cool science too. We had over 1,800 observations, which actually will be submitted to the Monarch Larva Monitoring Project, which is a much bigger nationwide effort, which actually a lot of research is based on that. So we actually, people are really eager to get involved. We had about the same number of people that we did last year, and we did pretty much all of our trainings virtually. We are hoping to one day be in person again. But this project really works well. We also have newsletters. We try and engage with people. We have an email address that people can ask us questions about what they're seeing. So we find that people are really interested in being involved and learning. And so, yeah, this week we'll be talking about kind of what we've learned throughout this summer and then the last 3 years of this project. And we'll most likely be doing this again next year. So we're hoping for a 4th year of data collection. So I don't know if that answers your question, but just to say that people with milkweed gardens are at least very eager to, get their data in there and spread the word.
So that's them contributing to the map, and there are other ways to contribute to this map. And so one thing would be if you're here and are playing with the map, be thinking about what's missing. What are there assets that are, is there a place that I can buy native plants that I want other people to know about? Is there a data set that could be missing? Of course, we want anybody who's got a festival or an event in here, to Rolando's point from earlier this evening, that a lot of these festivals are attuned to a T to the cultural heritage history of these experience with things like monarch butterflies, which are enriched with stories about great migration that we talked about before. In fact, the group Faith and Place here around Chicago runs a wonderful program called Migration and Me, which really teaches kids about monarch butterflies, but connects it to cultural stories of migration. The great stories of the monarch's return being, for the people of central Mexico, as if it's their ancestors returning at about the time of Day of the Dead, is a sort of a wonderful piece of resonance. So to the cultural history of it. And those stories add up to collective stories and knowledge about this aspect of the natural world. I can see another use though too. Supposing I'm a gardener and I just want to know where do I go? I can search the map, right, Karen, for plant sales or nurseries or stuff like that.
Yeah, so like I said, that is one of the layers on the map. So you can definitely see the ones. We have a few on there right now. Also, as we mentioned, on the resources page, we do have a card that does have some links. We don't list, of course, all of them, but we link to places that do list a lot. So there's, Indiana has a place that lists like places where you can get native plants. There's Illinois Native Plant Society also has a list of places, sales and nurseries that are nearby. So as we get into next year, we'll probably populate that map again. Of course, it's has been an evolving situation this year and last year. So it's something that is always being updated. But we do have those links there as well. So
sorry, but do you have this question here about oops, I just lost it in the chat. If the Field Museum is still giving away plants. I don't think
not
so.
Currently, it's not quite the right season. We will very likely be doing it again next year. So we'll be, and as part of this project, we do, as part of the Monarch Community Science Project, I should say, we do free plant milkweed giveaways where you get a few plants as well as some other flowering plants to go with your, that you can be planted in your garden. And then the free lawn signs as well that was mentioned. We also had signs like the image that was shown on that resources page. That is one of the signs we produced this year that we gave away.
And there's another a nice question here from Sharon about folks who in the I&M Canal Heritage area who might find this type of resource helpful and wondering if the information's been shared with the cooperative extension sites. Tonight is the rollout, so welcome to this ribbon cutting. And yes, that's a great idea to get it to the extension because and through Rolando to the ANHA, and other partners in heritage areas, just to see that, this is one way to kind of structure a way to find the stories and to tell them in this particular format. And I would say this has been a wonderful experience in terms of this. The point is for the map to be interactive and for it to be useful and to tell the stories that want to be told on the map. And that makes you think, oh man, if we're thinking about placemaking generally, wouldn't this be a cool format of a map of some of the things that our other partners on our in our network are thinking about? Maps of public art, maps of murals, sites of conscience, important places in the history of the region. You can envision cultural assets on a map like this that could be added to, and that's the point, is to get the dialogue going and to use the map as one of the safe spaces for the conversations that it's pretty safe to talk about monarch butterflies, although talk to some city councils about that and they might argue, but to extend it into some cultural conversation. And I think here a reason to have this particular topic conclude this conference is we had a variety of modes of gathering up our thinking over the last few nights about the role of architecture. Imagine endangered buildings on a map like this. Not exactly this map, but a similar one. Imagine those oral histories being told about particular places. Imagine linking on one of these dots and being driven over to StoryCorps or something about that site. Imagine the way that the spaces that we heard through ballet and through arts and culture on the map. And again, a click on the map brings you, opens the world of that particular space as part of this overall network. And then tonight, the community spaces that were centered, the conversation was centering around, that's very close to the purpose of this particular map. But like I said before, every click on the map, every one of those dots tells a significant story. And so that's the overall thing about sharing the places that make the region great. So I would see if there are any other questions, comments from the chat. Dr. Herts, I see you're still here. really appreciate it. And I wonder if you have anything that you want to say. Don't want to put you on the spot either. Karen, anything else we should say before we wrap?
No, thank you so much for taking a look at this. Like I said, this is our launch. I've been putting a lot of time and effort into this with my colleague Raina, who has contributed a great deal to this project, especially the map and survey. So you can always email me, again, kklinger@fieldmuseum.org or monarchs@fieldmuseum.org, also easy to remember, with any thoughts that you come across, or like we have here, suggestions of places where we should share this with. And yeah, we're happy to grow this project. This is a participatory project. We want your participation, not just adding maps, but feedback, what's missing and what more we can do. We have ideas for how to expand this. So yeah, definitely, we'd love your feedback.
Yeah, Victoria, great point there about creating a postcard for sharing and resources. And we, I think linked in here, by the way, is the Living in the Dunes guide that Save the Dunes did some amazing work on. There is amazing work across this region, and we want to be sure that it's capturing, and that's a wrong word, representing all the great work that's out there. Would love to share, and yeah, there's the link, savedunes.org/resources. So we will share ideas for sharing, and also we'll be posting the talks and so forth from the conference. It'll be available at the calumetheritagearea.org website after we process some stuff. And I want to thank everybody for attending over tonight and for the last several nights. And Karen, for your amazing work here too. That's really great. And so I think with this, we should conclude early and give you 16 minutes back. Thank you. Did you do that?